Chapter 1104. The white gas formed a heart in the air, looking like a marshmallow. The lingering scent of dusk and the white clouds in the blue sky. Everything was different because of someone's existence. At that moment, even the air was filled with a slight sweetness. Chin Mo could feel his heartbeat. If it wasn't for the restricted conditions, he would probably have hugged the only person who could disturb him. That was the only way to calm the restlessness in his blood. Fortunately, one of them was upstairs while the other was downstairs, so he hadn't lost his mind. Just looking at that face, his gaze couldn't help turning gentle. Chin Mo didn't even notice this. On the other hand, the shadows who had heard the commotion asked, "Young master, what happened?" That should be young Master Joe's voice, right? But it was a little blurry. They couldn't hear it clearly. Chin Mo didn't retract his gaze. He stood by the window with one hand in his pocket. His voice was calm. "Nothing much, someone just confessed to me." The shadow guards, wait a minute, the person who confessed was young Master Joe? They had wanted to ask more questions. Unexpectedly, the usually aloof young master opened his mouth again at this moment. "If you really want me to describe what kind of confession scene it was, I can also tell you. A certain someone got 2 drones from God knows where and was controlling them remotely. He used the exhaust to draw a heart in the sky for me." The shadows. "Young master, when you say these words, can you not smile? Of course, you are still single, so you probably won't be able to enjoy such treatment." Chin Mo's voice was calm as usual. But the shadow guards could still hear the boastful tone in his voice. Chin Mo glanced downstairs. "All right, I have to go down to receive the gifts. If not, a certain someone might cry." The shadow guards, why did they have to communicate with their young master about the kidnapping? Ever since their young master had been kidnapped, there hadn't been a day when they weren't showing off their love. In the courtyard, Bojio kept the remote control. She was still a little shy and nervous. After all, she had never confessed like this before. She felt that it was rather romantic, but she didn't know what the Almighty was thinking. But there was one thing. With Bojio's confession, the few kids who had wanted to get close to the castle but didn't dare to, all ran over. Their snow-white skin, blue eyes, and soft golden short hair made them look like little angels. Their cheeks were all pink. One of the boys was still wearing a small shirt and pants. He was looking at the drone in the sky. There were 3 other children beside him. They were all American natives. They were around 4 years old and looked very pretty. They could not help but exclaim, "Wow!" Row after row of them stood there, the amazement on their faces was obvious. "Big brother." The youngest girl tugged at the sleeves of the little boy. She was probably only 3 years old and spoke in English. She raised her hand and pointed. "Beautiful." The little boy lowered his head and helped her wipe the corner of her mouth that had just finished eating the cream cake. Then he said, "When you grow up, I'll give you this for your birthday." "Okay." When the little girl nodded her head, she was so cute that she almost melted. The main reason was that the boy was always on guard, telling her not to get too close to the castle. This scene reminded her of her childhood. At that time, the Almighty had been like this too. He had given her everything he could. But from the start, she had really treated the Almighty as a little girl. Bojio arched a brow. Fortunately, the Almighty had forgotten about it. Otherwise, with his personality, he would definitely bring up the past. With that thought, Bojio smiled and walked out of the castle. When the little kids saw Bojio coming out, they panicked. All of them were a little panicked, and they started to speak in English. "God, did you see that person's eyes? They are black. She definitely knows magic. We will be cursed like the dwarves in Snow White. What should we do?" The little girl turned and asked, "Big brother, what should we do?" The 4-year-old boy was nervous as well, but he still had to protect Bojio. He moved forward and watched her approach cautiously. He didn't forget to explain, "Asians have black eyes. Don't you guys watch TV?" Bojio smiled. "Ah, that's right. Children immersed in the world of magic couldn't understand sometimes. It was probably because they were already prepared for this place. For example, they had heard stories about vampires coming out to bite them if they didn't listen. Hence, as Bojio approached, they were still afraid. They even wanted to turn and run. But both of their legs seemed to be nailed to the ground. That person was already very close to them. Big brother, will he eat us? The little girl gripped her sleeves tighter when she saw Bojio walking towards them. The little boy blocked her and took a step back. He was about to tell the person in front of him to leave. The person bent over and handed him a drone with a faint smile. This is for you. You don't have to wait for you to grow up. You can give this to the little kid behind you now. The little boy didn't accept it since his family had told him not to accept things with unknown origins. Bojio found it interesting. He was just like the Almighty when he was young, always rational. It seems like you are worried. How about this, I'll leave it here and you can play with it. I'll be heading back for dinner. Bojio placed the drone on the ground and turned to head back to the castle. The little boy turned back to look at the little girl's eyes. He knew that she wanted to play. He lowered his head to make sure there wasn't any danger. Then he looked up and shouted at the slender back view, "Thank you." The old butler watched from inside the castle. He was envious. In this aspect, his young lord seemed to have a natural affinity. Unlike him, the children didn't want the candy he gave them. Even so, the old butler wouldn't let others see his loneliness. He raised his hand to look at his pocket watch. After seeing his young lord's rare confession, it was time for him to prepare dinner. Come to think of it, it wasn't bad for young Master Qin to stay here. Compared to the past, his young lord was rarely so energetic. She was smiling every day. It wasn't like the past. Even her smile wasn't so bright. She did everything alone. Other than him, there wasn't anyone else accompanying his young lord. Now that the old butler was getting on in years, sometimes he would wonder what his young lord would do if he wasn't around anymore. In this huge castle, his young lord would really be the only one left. His young lord might seem approachable, but in reality, it wasn't easy to get close. This was probably the trait of the Asians. Fortunately, his young lord had someone she wanted. Even though the old butler knew that this person's identity wasn't suitable for her, money couldn't buy his young lord's love. The old butler smiled. If that was the case, he should find some time to invest in the family. He had to admit that the old butler was definitely close. His way of thinking wasn't too far off. On the other side, when Qin Mo walked down, Bojio had just finished sending the drone into the courtyard. Qin Mo stuffed a hand into his pocket, his gaze deepening as he looked at her. You're giving a gift to someone else? I don't understand your sincerity at all. Bojio paused. The one for Brother Mo is in the sky. The drone is also a part of the gift. Was Qin Mo that childish? If it was up to him, why would he give something to someone else? Bojio caressed the bridge of her nose. She didn't reply. She hadn't expected the Almighty to be so obsessed with the drone. Qin Mo tilted his head. His face was still good-looking. Besides, you gave it to a kid. Will he know how to play with it? Bojio smiled. Brother Mo, I only gave one drone. I still have another one. With that, she took the other drone out from the bushes and passed it to Qin Mo. At this moment, the communication device was still switched on. The shadow guards only had one thought after listening to the entire process. Their young master was so petty that he was even jealous of a kid. How scary. But Qin Mo had his own thoughts. He caressed the wings of the drone with his fingers and lifted the corner of his mouth. Bojio glanced at his handsome face and muttered softly, he really looks like him. She didn't expect the Almighty to hear her. Qin Mo turned, his voice calm. What does he look like? Nothing, I'm just saying that the little boy looks like my childhood friend. Bojio couldn't possibly say that she had given him the drone because he looked like his childhood friend. That was the perfect explanation for Bojio. Unexpectedly, Chin Mo laughed coldly. Is that so? Bojo couldn't tell if the Almighty was happy or unhappy. Hadn't he laughed just now? Why did it seem like, which type do you like? Chin Mo asked again, his tone not casual. For example, those who act mature at the age of 4 or 5? Bojo paused. How was she going to answer this question? From a psychological point of view, this type of boy is very shrewd. Chin Mo arched a brow. You're so dumb. You definitely can't tell how good your little friend is. Bojo didn't reply because it was hard for her to hold back her laughter. After all, it was really interesting to hear the Almighty ridiculing himself. What else? What's so bad about this type of boy? Bojo cleared her throat and asked seriously. Chin Mo stood there, his tone calm. There are many, but you don't have to understand so much. I'm the one you should understand. With that, Chin Mo walked into the castle. Bojo paused for a second. Thinking about his words. Once she tasted sweetness in her mouth, she walked to the Lamborghini and started the engine. She lowered her voice. Little Blackie, I think my confession seems to have worked. If it doesn't have any effect, I'm starting to suspect that the person you like is gay. The navigation system fluctuated. But, Master, is it really appropriate to use this method of chasing girls on a boy? Bojo lifted her lips. Why not? I'm going to continue understanding my little secretary. You're in charge of searching for information. I'll do some research later. What information? The navigation system didn't understand. Didn't Master always think that the information it found was too simple and crude? Bojo smiled. Of course it's to find out which type is good and doesn't have any side effects. Also, it allows me to do whatever I want. That's about it. The navigation system, who was the one who said that her goal wasn't to sleep with others? Master, you're so shameless that even I'm scared. Why? Are you stunned by my handsomeness? Bojo watched as the navigation system fluctuated. She patted the Lamborghini. Calm down, do a good job. The navigation system was cold. Isn't it just sleeping with someone? It's simple. Chin Mo entered the hall. He didn't know how someone was thinking about sleeping with him. There were some things he told himself not to care about, but he couldn't help thinking about. Why was she able to have absolute trust in that person? She couldn't do it in front of him. Childhood sweetheart, these 4 words. In the past, he didn't think much of it. But now, it was an eyesore. Even the restlessness from receiving the gift was suppressed. After all, he was a kidnapped person. There were some things he had to pay attention to. After Chin Mo thought it through, he sat on the wooden chair beside the dining table. He was indeed under house arrest. He didn't have a phone or any other means of communication. There didn't seem to be anything in this castle. Besides the Lamborghini that only Bojo could drive, there weren't any other means of transportation. This place could be considered isolated from the rest of the world. That fellow had been living here all along? Chin Mo stood up and walked to the bookshelf. Indeed, it was different from when he was at the Fu family's house. There weren't books like Overbearing CEO Falls in Love with Me. Instead, there were books about computers and medicine. Of course, there were also some foreign classics. There was a complete set of the Sherlock Holmes series and more detective reasoning books. Chin Mo understood that a person's anti-reconnaissance ability had to go through later stages of training. Now, he also understood why the police couldn't do anything to Z. Because when your opponent knew you better than you definitely wouldn't be able to catch her. Chin Mo's gaze swept across the books. He flipped open one of them. After reading 2 pages, he put it down. The fastest way to understand a person was to see what kind of books this person read and what kind of people he interacted with. Z never interacted with anyone. When he came here, Chin Mo realized that there was only the old butler. Moreover, judging from the old butler's surgical technique, he was meticulous and had a strong sense of observation. When Chin Mo did things, he had always been thorough. He was also calculating the time so that no one would discover his current actions. But when Chin Mo flipped to the third book, his gaze paused. He completely forgot about the time. Because he saw a photo. It was placed on the bookshelf. It was an old photo. Chapter 1105. In the photo was a little girl around 4 years old. She had soft black hair, clear eyes, and a face that looked like it wanted to be pinched. From the bridge of her nose to her mouth, she was delicate and pleasing to the eye. She also had a naive look. Logically speaking, with such looks, she should be very obedient. However, her movements looked like she was climbing a wall. One of her short legs had already stepped on a tree branch. It was a little like a little tyrant had run out, full of arrogance and domineeringness. That posture really made it seem like no one could stop her pace. The photo was probably taken secretly. Otherwise, the little girl wouldn't have turned around. Her round eyes were looking somewhere, and her eyelashes were long and black. It was probably a group photo. He could vaguely see another person in the photo. Below the photo, half an arm and a pair of hands could be seen. The hands were also very small. But even so, the observant Almighty Chin could tell that it was a boy's hands. Boy, Chin Mo's fingers tightened. He was about to put the photo back. An old voice with a low laugh came into his ears. That was when young Lord was young. When she was young Lord wasn't as obedient as she is now. She always played with Louis next door. She didn't listen to anyone and liked to climb walls. She even climbed secretly. This was her climbing the wall next door. Louis found out and asked her to come down. Speaking up to this point, the old butler shook his head, a doting smile on his face. Unfortunately, young mistress was too young back then and didn't want to jump down directly. Luckily, Louis told her to jump, and he caught her from below. Master was the one who took the picture, but unfortunately, Louis wasn't there. Chin Mo took another look at the photo. The little boy was wearing a black suit. Even though only his hands were exposed, it was enough to tell that he liked to dress up since he was young. Louis? American? He's Chinese. His English name is Louis. The old butler smiled and said, I wasn't around at that time. Everything I heard was from others. When young mistress first came here, she always talked about her little friend. Sometimes, when she ate something good, she would say that it would be great if her pet was here. Later on, young mistress did many things and got into trouble, so her personality became like this. The old butler's eyes darkened as he reminisced. So, if young Master Chin wants to see something, you can ask me directly. According to young mistress, she will send you back once your hand recovers. I hope young Master Chin won't do anything to hurt young mistress. This sentence was very obvious. In reality, the old butler knew that it was impossible for young Master Chin not to know that young Master Chin had been investigating her ever since he came in. But since she didn't say anything, he pretended that nothing had happened. However, if some things were known by outsiders, the young master's safety would not be guaranteed. From the old butler's point of view, he would definitely be wary of Chin Mo. However, no one knew. Almighty Chin's thoughts were all on that photo. Whether it was the meaning expressed in the photo or the old butler's description. Chin Mo was very clear. This Louis was very important to someone. Chapter 1106. That was why that person had stopped after watching Hoshino's competition video. Every time that person glanced up at Hoshino, there was a strong sense of connection. He told himself not to be bothered. But it felt as though there was a huge rock pressing down on his chest. Even lifting his hand to place the photo back in its original position would affect his heart. It was as though he had returned to that day. When they had sparred at the plaza, a BMW Tomahawk had appeared and taken her away. That trust and cooperation. He had thought that it was only between them. But now, there was a person who appeared in her life one step earlier than him. It was a reality that couldn't be changed. It seemed as though there was nothing he could do. Chin Mo returned to his original position. His side profile didn't look the slightest bit emotional, noble and handsome. Even the curve of his chin was perfect. Chin Mo knew that this elder was giving him a warning. Even though he knew it wasn't possible. But he would still think about it. If only he had been the first person to appear in her life. If only he had been the one to carry her down from the wall in the photo. Chin Mo, who had always been known for his rationality, had actually used the word if. The last ray of light disappeared. Before dinner started, candles were lit on the dining table. The silver cutlery was placed on the table, reflecting the gentle light. Bojo felt that this was the first time she was hosting the Almighty at home. Romance couldn't be lacking. Since there weren't any roses, she had plucked a lot of wild roses from outside. Chin Mo glanced at her but didn't say a word. Bojo sat down, arching a brow. What was wrong with that? She turned back to look at Grandfather Butler, who had a faint smile on his face. She glanced up, sweeping a glance at the bookshelf. She had a rough idea of what had happened. Bojo remained silent for a moment before walking to the side to grab a small laptop. She inserted the USB drive and opened one of the documents. Then she turned the screen. This is the recent case on Fifth Avenue. The police aren't able to find any leads since they don't have any tools. Especially the last person, he seemed to be lying in the bathtub, drowning if he didn't come out. At first, I suspected it was deep hypnosis, but then I saw this. Bojo changed the photo. Needle, these are probably drug addicts. Chin Mo looked up at the youngster in front of him. Bojo chuckled. I know Brother Mo doesn't wish to speak to me now since my identity is known and I even kidnapped you. But I don't wish to see the maiden's sacrifice happen and neither does Brother Mo regarding this matter. I can provide you with some information. Besides, I need your analysis. What kind of person do you think the culprit is? Chin Mo replied, it doesn't matter who the culprit is. What's important is that the culprit will do it again. We have to find the similarity between these few people to deduce the next culprit. Common point? They are all Chinese. Bojo couldn't see anything from the photos. I'll check later. Chin Mo replied absent-mindedly, swirling the wine glass in his hand. Even his voice sounded faint. Chapter 1107. Bojo couldn't change this. That was her way of doing things. For a long time, she couldn't seem to remember the Almighty. At that time, she almost went down the wrong path. She only understood when she lost someone important to her. In this world, there were too many people who couldn't tell right from wrong. They couldn't stand the fact that a person was serious and allowed the criminal to commit the crime again. They didn't care who was hurt because they weren't the one being hurt. They didn't understand the torment of saying it but not saying it out loud. They didn't understand what it felt like to be trampled on after being hurt. When a person did something wrong, no matter how big the matter was, as long as they showed weakness, they would be comforted. That shouldn't be the case. Who was the real weak one? They were the ones who were persecuted and couldn't explain themselves. Many people couldn't afford to be tormented but they did it regardless of the cost. They wanted fairness. Many accomplices trampled on this fairness, making it impossible for it to raise its head. Even though there was the law, it wasn't the strongest weapon. Hence, she chose to use this method to expose some things. At the very least, when a girl was bullied, she would have the courage to say no. That way, the person who liked to lie on her back wouldn't leave just like that. At the very least, after a mother defended her daughter's rights, she would receive the compensation she deserved. She wouldn't have to go through so many trials and only receive malice. The real culprit had gotten away scot-free, and nothing had happened to him. In the past, Bojo had the thought of changing. But now, she wouldn't give up this method for anyone, even if it was that person she really, really wanted. Both of them didn't speak. The atmosphere at the dining table wasn't good either. No matter how beautiful the roses were, it didn't ease the tension between them. Even in the castle, there was silence. The old butler stood at the side, wearing white gloves. He wiped the transparent wine glass, his eyes half-lidded. Then he walked over with a bottle of red wine, his voice old but natural. Young Master Cheen is very interested in your childhood. Young lord, maybe you can have a chat. Cheen Mo frowned, not saying a word. Bo Jiu glanced up. Childhood? Yes. The old butler said in English. Young Master Cheen looked at the photo on the bookshelf for a long time. You can tell young Master Cheen about you and Louis. Bo Jiu coughed lightly before replying, nothing much. Young master, are you shy? The old steward pushed up his glasses and observed the expressionless young master of the Cheen family, whose hand paused in picking up the wine glass. He continued, then I'll go get the diary you wrote back then. It'll be more convenient than what you're saying now. Bo Jiu, what happened to Grandpa Butler? He seemed to always mention her childhood. However, if the Almighty really saw the diary, would he remember something? The old butler was a man of action. After a short while, he brought over an aged book and passed it to Cheen Mo. Young Master Cheen, you must be curious about our young lord. Her personality and childhood experiences are all in this book. You can take a look. Chapter 1108. But right now, he didn't want to see how close she had been to her childhood sweetheart. He had always been polite, even when it came to rejecting someone. I'm not interested. With that, he wiped his mouth with a napkin and stood up. Also, thank you for your hospitality today. I'm full, I'll be heading upstairs. Bo Jiu glanced over at the plate with the broccoli on it and the empty wine glass. How could he be full after just one bite? The old butler chuckled. I won't force young Master Cheen, please. Bo Jiu watched the scene, feeling as though there was a deeper meaning behind Grandfather Butler's smile. She didn't stay idle, she couldn't let the Almighty leave just like that. She had to continue attacking. Otherwise, her romantic confession would be a waste of time. Bo Jiu arched a brow, placing the wine glass and steak on the table. She smiled. I'm going to eat in the bedroom. The old butler wasn't going to interfere, but there was one thing he could remind her. Young lord, a girl shouldn't be too proactive. All right. Bo Jiu took a moment before adding, but I have to feed the Almighty something. I'll come down after he finishes this plate. The old housekeeper finally understood what it felt like to raise a child for someone else after taking care of him for the day. He let out a long sigh. Young lord, you don't have to feel guilty towards young Master Cheen since you will let him go. It's not just about the kidnapping. Bo Jiu chuckled, carrying the plate upstairs. She didn't tell Grandfather Butler that she had been the one who owed him from the start. When she had been young, her father hadn't been around and she had been allowed to play by herself. Basically, he had been the one to raise her. He knew that she liked to eat and would always carry snacks in his pocket. Even during the winter, when he liked to wear a suit and attend various business meetings with Grandfather and he would bring her along. When he didn't bring her along, he must have been angry because she had run out to play with others and dirted her hands. After all, the Almighty had been a clean freak since young. Or rather, it had been worse when he had been young. That day, he didn't take her out, and she wanted to sleep in his bed, so she climbed the wall. She didn't expect him to block her. Bo Jiu could still remember the cold little boy standing there helplessly. Little Bo Jiu, are you an idiot? Come down, I'll catch you. Now that she thought about it, the Almighty had done everything he had promised her. At that time, she was always pestering him. Every time, she would rely on the fact that he wouldn't really get angry and ask him not to return to China. Because she would miss him. That year, the Almighty was supposed to go back for the spring festival, but after hearing what she said, he didn't leave. Instead, he hugged her and asked her to stick the spring festival couplets on the door frame. He told her that this was a Chinese custom and even picked up dumplings for her to eat. At that time, she was really happy, thinking that the two of them would always be like this. Unexpectedly, she was the first to leave after that. Even if her imagination wasn't very rich, she could roughly understand the feeling of being left behind. She was the one who owed him. She didn't even keep her promise, yet she kept asking him to stay. Bojo caressed the photo. There was a sweetness in the depths of her heart, but it was also a little bitter. Chapter 1109. Inside the room, Chin Mo stood by the window, unbuttoning his shirt with one hand. His gaze was deep. Just by looking at his handsome side profile, it wasn't possible to tell what he was feeling. This was the scene Bojo saw when she walked in. She wondered if the Almighty was unhappy that she had kidnapped him and wanted to return to China. He probably noticed where she was. Chin Mo turned, stuffing a hand into his pocket. He glanced up. "Sugar Daddy, are you free again?" The mockery in his voice was obvious. The way the Almighty called her Sugar Daddy was like how an assassin would look at a blue wolf. Bojo coughed lightly and took another step forward. "Brother Mo didn't eat much down there just now. Grandfather Butler's steak isn't bad, Brother Mo can try it. If you aren't used to it, I have my own unique cooking skills." Chin Mo watched the food in her hands, not saying a word. He didn't show any signs of rejection. Bojo's eyes lit up. She understood Chin Mo. If the Almighty really didn't like it, his gaze would be filled with rejection and he would exude a cold aura. It was the kind of coldness that kept people 1,000 miles away. Bojo had seen it before. She was worried that the Almighty's coldness would be used on her one day. From the looks of it, there was still hope. Bojo lifted the corners of her lips. She picked up a piece of steak with her fork and fed it to him. Chin Mo glanced at her before opening his mouth. After swallowing the steak, he felt the weight on his chest lighten. Bojo watched Chin Mo. She didn't know how wonderful it felt to feed the person she liked. She had to hurry and feed him more. Bojo smiled. She picked up another piece of steak and passed it over. He lowered his lids to eat. He was so handsome that he looked like he was reading a comic. Bojo was in the midst of her happiness. Unexpectedly, the thin lips that were about to touch the piece of meat suddenly changed direction and touched hers. From this angle, it was Bojo. She could only see Bojo holding the tray. But Chin Mo was different. He held the back of her head with one hand and bent down. He didn't intend to end the kiss hastily. Her mind went blank. After it ended, Bojo's figure didn't change. Chin Mo pressed his forehead against hers, his voice hoarse. "Forget the person you knew when you were young." "MMH?" Bojo snapped out of her daze. "What?" "Forget about him," Chin Mo repeated. Bojo wanted to say that it was a little difficult, but she didn't know how to say it. In the end, she reached out and hugged him. Instead of answering, she asked with a smile in her voice, "Brother Mo, are you jealous?" "Huh, why would I be jealous?" Almighty Chin didn't even mean what he said. "I'm reminding you not to be so stupid. You've been tricked since you were young." Bojo wanted to laugh, but she tilted her head and held it in. After all, it was a joy to hear the Almighty criticize himself. "Little Bojo, be serious." Chin Mo reached out and pinched the back of the youngster's neck. He seemed to be very unhappy that she was still playing along when he was so serious. Bojo glanced up sharply. "What did you just call me?" "Little Bojo." Chin Mo's voice was calm. "Isn't your surname Bo?" "Yes, my surname is Bo," Bojo repeated. In that instant, she seemed to have returned to the past. Every time the prince in the suit saw her, his handsome and aloof face would look as though he wanted to educate her. He would call her by her full name. Little Bojo. The name made Bojo break into a sudden smile. She looked at Chin Mo with a hint of playfulness. "Brother Mo, call me that again." Chin Mo looked at her. After a long time, he stretched out his hand and flicked her forehead. "Little gangster Bo, when you say this, shouldn't you let go of my waist first? Are you having fun taking advantage of me?" "It's all right." Bojo didn't let go. You kissed me just now. What's wrong with me hugging you? Honestly, brother Mo, you can't have such double standards. Chin Mo arched a brow. Do you think you can do whatever you want because you kidnapped me? Sugar daddy. Bo Jio let go. She thought that he was right. She couldn't go overboard. Even if she wanted to go overboard, she would have to wait until she got the medicine. Chin Mo walked to the study table. Let's talk about the case first. Sure. Bo Jio placed the tray down. She turned on the computer and pulled up the information. Chin Mo looked at the pictures. Every picture was like an information network. It seeped into his mind and formed a blurry picture. The Chinese stationed overseas are mostly international students. They live alone and don't have boyfriends. Their looks aren't outstanding and their family conditions are average. Check the online preview records before they died. Chin Mo's voice was calm, but he went straight to the point. Since they don't have a wide circle of friends, the way to target them should be on the internet. I think so too. Bo Jio shook the USB in her hand. That's why I checked before coming. The preview records are safe, but there's something I don't understand. Chin Mo glanced in her direction. What is it? These numbers. Bo Jio opened the chat tool of one of the victims. A string of Arabic numbers appeared on the chat box. The victim's reply was also numbers. There were only 1 or 2 sentences and that was it. But the whole thing was written in such a way. Bo Jio instinctively felt that it was strange. Moreover, all the victims' chat records contain this content. Bo Jio tapped the spacebar and switched to another page. It's the same for this. For example, this string of numbers, 8464, 7486, 64, 54, 94, 2264, 96. What does it mean? Sherlock Holmes code? No. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. It doesn't seem like it. This is indeed a communication method they got from somewhere. If they use this method to communicate, the other party will respond. But this isn't Sherlock Holmes code. Bo Jio arched a brow. Are you so sure? Chin Mo spoke slowly. Do you think everyone knows how to read Sherlock Holmes code? Even if they want to kill someone, they have to make it easy for them to enter. That's what the murderer is thinking. Bo Jio supported the side of her face with her left hand. She looked lazy, like the young master of a wealthy family, deep in thought. If it wasn't Sherlock Holmes code, what could it be? Simple? Like 1314 or something? This came to mind. Bo Jio was suddenly reminded of the Almighty's passwords. She glanced over at Chin Mo, who was still staring at the numbers on the screen. She didn't think that the Almighty would still sit beside her after knowing her identity. This was probably thanks to her cleverness in kidnapping the Almighty. Cool. Chapter 11:10. Bo Jio was good at self-affirmation. She glanced at the handsome face in front of her, thinking about when to drug him. When Chin Mo glanced over, he saw a certain someone with a mischievous look in her eyes. He didn't know what she was planning. He reached out and lifted her chin. Even if you want to tie me up, you have to retract your claws and behave yourself. Do you understand? Oh. There wasn't much sincerity in her reply. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed. He reached out and caressed her lips with his thumb. Are you brushing me off? Not yet. Bo Jio sat up straight and smiled at him. That pair of eyes seemed to be rippling with water, clear and limpid. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. There were only a few centimeters between them. If he lowered his head, he would be able to kiss her. Now, Chin Mo knew that she was doing it on purpose. He released her chin with his right hand and pressed down on her restless hand. Are you crazy for lust? Bo Jio smiled brightly. I'm checking on Brother Mo's injury. I remember that my wound is on my hand. Where are you going to touch it? Chin Mo's voice was calm and cold. There was an inviolable sense of abstinence. Bojo retracted her hand regretfully. It was so hard to be a gangster nowadays. Just as she stood up, her wrist was grabbed again. Chin Mo arched a brow. You want to leave after taking advantage of me? Otherwise. Bojo only managed to say 2 words before she was pulled over by a force. The voice beside her ear was still calm. It won't be that easy. Bojo didn't even think. She lifted her lips. Brother Mo can take it back. Their breaths intertwined. Chin Mo smiled and held the back of her head. He lowered his gaze and kissed her. The pleasant scent of mint lingered in the air. After a long time, Bojo felt her entire body go soft. She held onto his shirt tightly, her thoughts empty. Chin Mo wasn't any better. When he kissed her just now, he was still thinking about her childhood sweetheart. He wanted her to forget about him. At this moment, the soft and fragrant jade in his arms kept wanting to continue. Even though the location and time weren't right. But he couldn't resist his hot-bloodedness. Finally, when Bojo couldn't catch her breath, Chin Mo distanced himself from her. He lowered his lids to look into her clear eyes and retracted his breath. Bojo's eyes were still in a daze. When she saw him return to his usual self so quickly, she once again felt that using a honey trap on the Almighty would only have a temporary effect and wouldn't be able to take him down. Do you like it that much? The Almighty's voice came from beside her ear, and there was a rare hint of laughter in his voice. Bojo replied. Sweet. When she said this, she didn't forget to hug Chin Mo's waist. She didn't care if the Almighty hated her for being so clingy. She had already kissed him. Contrary to her expectations, that face did not show any signs of resistance and allowed her to fool around. The coldness in his eyes also disappeared. This should mean that he wasn't angry anymore. Then I can try to drug it tonight. Now that the atmosphere was so good, he might as well stay for a while. Chin Mo was indeed too indulgent with her. He was investigating a case, but he allowed her head to rest on his shoulder. Her head sank bit by bit, and in the end, she even snorted. He retracted his gaze from the screen and straightened her head with one hand. When the old butler came in, he saw this scene. He was still holding tea and snacks in his hands, and he smiled politely. Young master must have disturbed young master Chin. I'll wake her up now and let her go back to her room to sleep. There's no need for that. Chin Mo was nonchalant with a hint of pampering. Her head isn't that heavy anyway. The old butler chuckled, not saying anything else. He placed the exquisitely made teapot and teacups down and walked out of the room. On second thought, young lord's kidnapping wasn't a bad idea. The sky outside turned dark. Bojo wouldn't sleep for long in this position. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was the beautiful curve of his jaw. It reminded her of when she had been young. Back then, when they had attended the ball at night, he had been younger than her, but somehow, he had the strength to carry her and leave early every time. Grandpa had even joked that his grandson had disregarded etiquette for her. Her heart would always soften at the thought of this. At this moment, Chin Mo lowered his gaze. You're awake? Sugar daddy. Brother Mo, the way you address me. Bojo wasn't used to it. Chin Mo's tone was calm. Why? Isn't this how you call yourself? That's true, but the tone isn't right. I don't feel anything. Bojo placed her chin on the back of his uninjured hand, looking a little rascal. Chin Mo glanced at her before glancing at the teacup. Bojo was smart. She lifted the teacup and placed it by Chin Mo's lips. She had to be proactive when it came to feeding him. I'm asking you to drink it yourself. Aren't you thirsty after sleeping for so long? Chin Mo couldn't help kissing her. Why are you so dumb? Bojo paused. She was obedient at this moment. She drank the tea and decided to take advantage of the good atmosphere to get the medicine. Where are you going? Chin Mo glanced up. Bojo started acting again. There aren't many clothes for Brother Mo to wear in the castle. I'm going out to buy some for you. It's best if it's more suitable for home use so it's easier to take off. Easier to take off? Chin Mo repeated these 5 words slowly. He seemed to be hinting at something. What do you want to do? Bo Jiu was already feeling guilty. With his question, she felt even more guilty. Fortunately, she had strong mental fortitude. I don't want to do anything. It's just convenient when you shower. Is that so? Chin Mo's gaze was faint. You want to buy clothes in the middle of the night? Bo Jiu smiled. The Fifth Avenue is bustling at this time. With that, Bo Jiu went down the stairs. Chin Mo glanced at the photo she had been holding while she had been sleeping. He frowned. Out of sight, out of mind. He turned on the receiver and a voice came through. Young master, madam is asking how long you will be meeting her parents. When the shadow asked this question, he lifted his head to look at the moon in the sky. He wondered when his young master would end his journey of torturing the dogs. Chin Mo replied nonchalantly, not necessarily. I feel good now. What feeling? The shadow didn't understand. Chin Mo tapped on another photo and said slowly, the feeling of being chased. Shadow. I want to hang up. Protect my mother. I don't need you for now. With that, Chin Mo turned off the receiver. He listened to the sound of the car outside. His gaze deepened. Bo Jiu was sitting in the car. Her fingers were on the steering wheel. Her tone was devilish. Come, little blackie. Let's have a heart-to-heart talk. Master, are you asking me which medicine is good? I have already found out. There is a shop not far from us. It is said that it can raise a person's body temperature. You can give it a try. Bo Jiu said as she drove, I'm not talking about the medicine. Brother Mo might drive you in the next 2 days. When he tells you the password, you can let him drive away. Master, you don't have to use such methods to test me. Even if your little vixen is handsome, I won't be swayed. Bo Jiu paused when she heard the intelligent reply from the navigation system. Are my words that untrustworthy? Untrustworthy. It is all a test. It is all a ploy. The intelligent navigation continued to move. Bo Jiu arched a brow. I'm sad. You can wash yourself tomorrow. Lamborghini. Little blackie. Have you ever seen a car wash itself? Even an intelligent one. How could it wash itself? Master would bully it. All right, stop being arrogant. Let's talk business. Bo Jiu turned the car. Where is the shop? Intelligent navigation. Was this the business master was talking about? The road out of the castle wasn't a short one. In order to be more natural, Bo Jiu ordered a set meal from Burger King. After all, the Almighty hadn't eaten much today. Bo Jiu's attire was suitable for the season. She wore a black leather jacket that accentuated her long legs. She wore a black mask on her face. Someone at the side whistled when he saw her. As for the shop that little blackie mentioned, the decoration style was indescribable. Bo Jiu had never been to such a shop before. She entered with a mischievous air. The owner was a black man. Hey, try this. It's not bad. Bo Jiu looked at the leather whip recommended by the owner. Her tone was serious. I'm here to buy medicine. The black man's eyes lit up. He pulled the drawer open. Which wildcat do you want to conquer? I have everything here. Something that doesn't have any side effects on the body and can prevent people from being resistant to medicine. These are the only 2 requirements. You don't have to go overboard. Bo Jiu's voice was a little low. The owner could tell. He chuckled. You Asians are shy in this aspect. Take it. I guarantee it will meet your needs. Bo Jiu thanked him after taking the medicine. Then, she seemed to have thought of something. She lowered her body. I heard that the area isn't peaceful recently. I'm staying next door. I just moved in. I heard someone died recently. Will there be any problems? Officer, it's boring if you do that. The manager shook his finger, his expression a little bored. Bojo arched a brow. Officer? Brother, you seem to have misunderstood. What am I misunderstanding? Do you see the police car parked outside? Aren't you guys here every day because someone died here? The owner packed his things. He looked as though he was trying to say, don't treat me like a fool. Bojo chose this shop because of these reasons. Even though she was exposed, she didn't panic. Brother, I'm here to buy medicine. I'm also worried about my safety. After all, I'm Chinese. The shopkeeper believed him. He turned around and asked, you're really not a police officer? How do I look like one? Bojo sighed. She looked like a youngster who had her first awakening of love. I like someone very much. I feel like there's something missing between the two of us. That's why I'm here to buy some medicine. It'll add some atmosphere. The shopkeeper was good at such things. He chatted with Bojo for a long time. For example, what kind of girls in America liked. He scanned Bojo from head to toe. Orientals like you are quite popular now. They like to call you little cuties. But it depends on the girl you like. What type is she? Domineering, cold, and a little tsundere. Bojo was melancholic. She gets angry easily. Her eyes can freeze people. The owner frowned. That's a queen. That's right, a queen. Bojo glanced at the police car outside. She seemed worried. At this moment, the owner believed her. He was probably worried about his safety. When Bojo took out the money, he reminded her. Don't go home too late. The moment Bojo heard this, she knew what the manager had seen. Hence, she tried to ask. The owner smirked. Don't worry. You haven't snatched anyone's boyfriend. Snatch my boyfriend? What do you mean? Bojo instinctively knew the main point. The store manager looked around and said, I don't know about the others, but two of them liked the same man. The man brought them here to buy something. One of the girls even received a warning call from the other girl. I didn't expect the two girls to be gone just like that. Like the same man? Bojo lowered her eyes. A glint flashed across her eyes. She tried to organize her thoughts. But other than investigating the man, she didn't have a better idea. It seemed like there were some problems that required the Almighty's analysis. The police would get the news in less than a day. It would be hard for her to interrogate him if he was taken away. From her current perspective, the man was the biggest suspect. But if that was the case, it would be too simple. How could she explain the string of numbers in the chat records? Bojo retracted her gaze. She seemed to have thought of something. She pulled out a picture. There's something else. This is the picture. Do American girls like to play like this? She sent it to me, but I don't understand it. She keeps sending numbers. I don't want her to think that I'm old-fashioned, so I wanted to ask someone. The manager looked at the photo and was also very confused. Boy, what is this? Is this a new hobby of you international students? I really don't know about this. You can go and ask your classmates. Maybe they will tell you since you are pitiful. That's all I can do. Bojo walked out of the shop with a regretful expression. She opened the car door and sat in the car. She watched as the two plainclothes policemen entered. She didn't leave much information. That was all she had. If she asked again, the owner would be on guard. She decided to stop. At the very least, she had to make sure that she heard the truth. Bojo supported her chin with one hand, deep in thought. The luxurious car paired with the trendy jacket made her look like the dark male lead in the music video, Cold and Cool. On the streets, the American girl whistled at Bojo when she drove past. Hey, are you interested in playing? Chapter 11:11. Bojo was used to their open-mindedness. A glint flashed across her eyes and she smiled. Sure. Lamborghini. That wasn't right. Why was this happening? Master was supposed to go home to sleep after buying the medicine. Why was she fooling around outside? Master wasn't usually so easy to meet up with. Bojo reversed the car, her arms hanging out the window as she watched the girls. Where are we going? We have a party. One of the girls with a good figure winked. You will definitely like it. Bojo held her forehead with one hand. It's a pity my English isn't good. Oh. You've already spoken well. There are Chinese people in the party. The girl smiled. You won't be lonely. Bojo smiled. Lead the way. The American girls became even more rowdy. They looked at Bojo with interest. Lamborghini reminded her, Master, they are looking at you as though you are looking at your little vixen. TSK, they are always thinking about how to get their hands on you. Little Blackie, do you have eyes? Bojo followed behind the group of girls. The navigation system continued to fluctuate. Through the tones of you humans, my powerful system is able to distinguish the emotions within. Fine, even though you're more reserved than these people, you're all the same. You always want to sleep with someone. Little Blackie, you didn't follow me to China. Do you know the popular saying in the esports circle? Bojo memorized the route as she drove. The navigation system asked, what is it? Chin Mo is the only beauty in the world. It's a pity he can't sleep. Bojo replied lazily. You wouldn't understand even if I told you. The navigation system vibrated. I never expected Master's little vixen to have such a strong background. Of course, Bojo replied. She stopped the car and glanced over. It was indeed a party. The reason she had agreed to attend was because it was nearby. After all, there was a Chinese girl in the car. The parties in America were basically nightclub style, and some people could even be seen swaying their bodies inside. The music was great too. It was a heavy metal series with a DJ leading the beat. Bojo found a chance to chat with the girls. The Chinese girl was the one she talked the most. At the same time, he asked them about the popular way of chatting over here. I'm talking about the internet. I just came here and I'm not used to it, she explained. One of the American girls said, speaking of this, I saw my friend typing a string of numbers when she was chatting with someone. Do you Chinese like to chat in such a mysterious way? Is that why you came to ask us? Chinese? Bojo arched a brow. He was Chinese again, which meant that the locals didn't have this habit. Let's not talk about this. Do you want to go home with me today? The girl sat down next to him and smiled charmingly. My family's wine is very good. Bojo smiled devilishly and stood up. It's not convenient. What's inconvenient about it? The girl's expression of pity was somewhat seductive. Bojo laughed lightly. I'm afraid that if I leave with you, that person at home will be jealous. I can't deal with that person's jealousy. The American girl hooked her fingers around the black leather jacket. Just one night, he wouldn't be able to find out. It's up to you whether you are loyal or not. Bojo blocked her hand and smiled. I'm going, bye. The American girls watched the youngsters smile and followed her out, wanting to keep her. When they saw her leaving in a hurry, they grumbled, Mei Lin, you scared him. Come on, he doesn't look like he's scared at all. Moreover, look at where he just came from. Oh, my God, I'm so envious of the girl who can spend the night with him. At this moment, Bojo was already in the car. She held onto the steering wheel and did a beautiful drift. As an intelligent luxury car, Little Blackie's navigation system vibrated when it heard the conversation. It's a pity that they don't know that the person spending the night with Master isn't a girl but a man. Chapter 11-12. So what? Bojo asked. When she drove past the shop, she stopped the car. The black boss had just been interrogated by the police and was in a bad mood. He didn't even lift his head. What do you want? Bojio's fingers touched the pair of furry black cat ears hanging on the wall. This. Hey, it's you again. The black boss finally found someone to complain to. Brother, I misunderstood you just now. You don't know, but after you left, I was interrogated again. Seriously, my customers were so scared that they didn't dare to come in. Bojio remained calm. Why did they ask you again? They asked me if there was anything I forgot to say. The black man shrugged. They even asked if the man was suspicious. If you ask me, they underestimate the grudges between women. They should start from this aspect. Bojio arched a brow. What do you mean? It's simple. The black man took out 2 props even though they couldn't bear to look at them. Before number 2 appeared, number 1's sales were far ahead. The moment number 2 appeared, she acted arrogantly in front of number 1 every day. Do you think number 1 would be angry? Let me tell you a secret, I saw the girl from before. After her boyfriend cheated on her, her eyes turned frighteningly dark. It's really frightening when a girl looks at someone like that. Mainly, she wasn't looking at the man but the other girl. It's not an exaggeration to say that she has a motive to kill. Bojio frowned. But she shouldn't be the murderer. According to what you said, aren't the 2 victims in this case? That's why I'm curious. The black man shook his head. Ever since this incident, my business hasn't been good. 2 girls died in the vicinity and both of them came to my shop. The messy information caused her thoughts to lose track of what to do. What do you think of the man? The store manager pursed his lips. Apart from being a bit of a playboy, there's nothing else. In some ways, it's easier to get hold of Chinese girls here. You probably don't know this. I have to say something on behalf of the Chinese girls. Not all girls are like that, you've only met a small portion of them. In China, there are many girls who have self-respect, love, and strive to improve themselves. They are warm, pure, down-to-earth, clean, and dutiful. They have done amazing things together but are humble. They will stand up for injustice, they admire and respect others, they persevere in their dreams and work hard for it. That's how they exist. The store manager was probably used to the youngster's short sentences. He paused for a moment, using his fist to bump Bojio's shoulder. It's good to have such a girl. I'm being biased. If you have the chance in the future, you can go to Huaxia. Bojio smiled. You will definitely like it there. You can also sell your goods there. Oh, brother, I always thought that you Chinese were very shy and couldn't accept it. Bojio played with the cat ears on her hand. This thing is used everywhere. Why can't you accept it? The store manager laughed heartily. It was a very pleasant shopping experience. However, the Lamborghini, Little Blackie, seemed to have waited for a long time. When Bojio entered, the navigation system rippled. Such low efficiency, it doesn't seem like master's style. It changed the manager's view of Chinese girls. Bojio reversed the car with one hand. The navigation system fell silent for a few seconds before replying, Master, you've changed. Bojio, MMH? Little Blackie, in the past, you never spoke up for anyone. Bojio, I know now. Little Blackie, why? Bojio, because it's not just me. Little Blackie, what do you mean? Bojio, I'm not the only one doing these things. There are many people who are speaking out against injustice. I've seen them in China, they are a group of great girls. They are full of passion and aren't inferior to men. I don't want the day when they have the chance to go overseas, they will still be looked at with prejudice. Little Blackie. Human emotions are really complicated. For example, Master, when it comes to the little vixen you like, you clearly don't want him to leave. Why did you remind me to let him drive me away? It's really contradictory. Bojio turned on the high light. When the light reflected in her eyes, there was a faint glow. Because no matter how much I want him to stay, he doesn't belong here. He can only be Chin Mo where he belongs. No matter how intelligent little Blackie was, it wouldn't be able to understand such human emotions. Bojo didn't tell Chin Mo about the memories he had lost because of this. If he knew, how was the Almighty going to treat her? Should he catch her or not? Besides, when they had been young, he had said that he wanted to raise her into a lady. He would probably frown when he saw the current her. Since he had chosen to lose his memories, it must be because those memories were too painful for him. It would be great if the Almighty could remember. But if he couldn't, she wasn't willing to tear open his wounds and let him feel the pain again. Bojo wasn't sure what exactly had happened back then. But basically, she only had one goal now. To destroy the organization that had tampered with the Almighty's body and impersonated him to plot against her. The Maiden's Sacrifice. Bojo lowered her lids and looked at the string of numbers on her phone. After she stopped the car, she didn't enter the castle. Instead, she tapped on the screen and sent a message. Hoshino, I think I still need you. The night was dark. The castle seemed extremely serene under the moonlight. On the other side of the earth, a man had just woken up. He reached out to open the fridge door and held a bag of milk in his mouth. After biting it open, he saw the cat lying in the living room. He walked over with a smile on his face, clear and smooth. He was wearing home clothes, which hung loosely on his shoulders. After he squatted down, the clothes hung loosely. The cat meowed, sticking out its tongue to lick the man's outstretched palm. I was picked up. I didn't expect to become a traitor on the first day. Yusishin's hair was tied back like silk. It was hard to imagine a man with such a hairstyle and still looked sharp and handsome. You won't eat anything when I feed you. Hoshino will feed you. Who exactly picked you up? Yusishin asked as he picked up the cat. Hoshino saved the cat and replied, there's milk on the table. Go drink it. It was rare to see Yusishin pouting, but he seemed to be obedient. He held the bag of milk in his mouth and kicked something away. When is the competition? It's been boring recently. You can go for a friendly match now. You're the one who isn't participating. As Hoshino spoke, his fingers stroked the kitten's back, and he seemed to laugh. This kitten looks quite like you. Are you kidding? How can such a weak little thing look like me? Yusishin had the blood of the Black Dao. He supported his forehead with one hand and exuded a noble arrogance. Is it worthy? Hoshino was about to speak when his pocket vibrated. It was a different ringtone. Hoshino put down what he was doing and straightened his body. His side profile was handsome, like a porcelain jade plated with a layer of something else. When he saw the message, he pressed the screen. Got it, I'll head over immediately. Yusishin watched as Hoshino entered the room. When he came out, there was a black leather suitcase in his hands. Where are you going? Yusishin's brows gradually furrowed. Hoshino didn't have anything to hide from him. America. What about the competition? Yusishin's voice lowered. Hoshino didn't turn back. I can come back before the competition. As the door closed, Yusishin stood up. The more he looked at the cat, the more uncomfortable he felt. Then, he picked it up again. Hoshino has always had bad taste. Like me? Heh, what a lousy analogy. Your brother Hoshino is willing to die for little Spade. If he likes her so much, he can just marry her. Meow, meow. The only reply he got was the meow of a cat. Outside the castle, Bojo sat in the car, her head lowered as she sent messages. She didn't know that while she was doing this, Chin Mo was standing on the balcony of the second floor. He seemed to have been waiting for someone for a long time. The night dew stuck to the ends of his hair. It was a little wet. He originally thought that someone would come up immediately. From this angle, it was obvious what she was doing with her phone. Or rather, she was contacting someone. Chin Mo tightened his grip on the railing. Then, he released it. His gaze deepened. At this moment, Bojo confirmed Hoshino's schedule. Just as she was about to close the message page, her eyes lit up in the next moment. Could it be? Bojo slammed the car door with a bang. The black Lamborghini was still complaining about her violence. Bojo had already walked up the stairs and pushed the door open. She looked at Chin Mo, who was standing in front of the window. Brother Mo, I know what that string of numbers is. 9 squares. Chin Mo's voice was neither fast nor slow. The 3 words caused Bojo to pause. She asked helplessly, when did you guess it? You really couldn't guess it when you were here. Chin Mo was nonchalant. After all, Sugar Daddy is so stupid. His thoughts will affect each other. In reality, it was true that his thoughts would be affected. A certain someone was swaying in front of him and all he wanted to do was kiss her. Bojo shrugged. Alright, so what was that sentence? Sugar Daddy, you seem to have forgotten that you kidnapped me and took away my phone. Bojo swore that she could hear the mockery in the words Sugar Daddy. The Almighty's mockery was always present when it wasn't easy. Show me my phone. Bojo reached out to pass the phone to Chin Mo unexpectedly. Almighty Chin's gaze landed on the pair of fluffy ears. What is this? Bojo. Oh no, I forgot to cover it up. Chapter 11-13. I bought it for fun. Bojo sounded guilty but she didn't show it on her face. Her eyes were filled with smiles. Brother Mo, the password is important. Chin Mo smirked, his lips lifting. He didn't say much, meaning to let her off the hook for the time being. He reached out to take the phone, his fingers pausing when he reached for the WeChat. In the end, he didn't tap on anything. Instead, he opened his profile picture, pulled out the 9-grid pinyin and pressed the numbers. 8464, according to the 9-grid pinyin, it should start with the letter T. After that, the word ting came out. 7486, say, pretty? Bojo narrowed her eyes. I heard. That's right. Chin Mo continued pressing 64, U, 53, Ku, 94, 1, 2264, help, 96, I. Bojo's eyes darkened as the words appeared one by one. I heard you can help me kill someone. Chin Mo replied faintly. Bojo frowned. That's weird, this is from the victim. Why is she the one who died? Find all their chat records. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. That's the only way to find out the reason. Bojo turned on the computer and pulled out the photo. This is the person's reply. Bojo pointed to the blank profile picture. Chin Mo was at the side, typing on his phone. Sure, what's the name? Bojo instinctively knew that the next reply would be the main point. Who exactly did the victim want him to kill? The phone rang again. Chen Hong. Chin Mo frowned when he saw the 2 words. The other victim? Bojo's gaze was different from Chin Mo's. Brother Mo, did Chen Hong die before Shi Mo, That's according to the report. Chin Mo was deep in thought. Bojo replied, I received news today that Chen Hong stole Shi Mo's boyfriend and they had a conflict before. There is indeed a motive for murder, but this is obviously a series of murders. The 2 of them aren't related to the other victims and Shi Mo, was killed not long after. Bojo replied. There is no conflict between being killed and wanting to kill. Chin Mo interrupted her calmly. At this moment, he was analyzing everything from the perspective of criminal psychology. If that's the case, one of my suspicions would be resolved. Bojo turned. What is it? Every crime, there are always 2 murderers. Chin Mo paused for a moment. No, I should say that the murderer has an accomplice. Even though the accomplice isn't obvious, it's important. No one can commit murder for free, and there isn't any mention of money in the chat. There must be other conditions, such as helping with something. Chapter 11:14. Just because she doesn't like to talk doesn't mean she wouldn't want to kill someone. Chin Mo's voice was calm. Sometimes, when the grudge accumulates to a certain extent, such thoughts would appear. But there is one thing, the murderer might not have used her as an accomplice on Shenhong. Bo Jiu raised a brow. The other victims. That's just my conjecture, evidence is needed to confirm it. Chin Mo reached for the phone beside him and typed out the murderer's last words. I've sent you what you need to do in your mailbox, open it. Mailbox? Bo Jiu narrowed her eyes. This is, Chin Mo's voice didn't change. It might be the school's mailbox. Usually, such mailboxes aren't used, it's not surprising that the police missed it. I'll go to the school tomorrow. Bo Jiu smiled. Even though she hadn't been to the school much in the past, she was already familiar with it. She just had to climb over the walls. From the current clues, the murderer must have told Mo something important. Chin Mo placed his phone down and glanced up at her, his voice calm. I'm going to sleep. So early? Bo Jiu arched a brow, her hands moving faster than her mouth. Chin Mo glanced at a certain someone who was tugging at his shirt, his handsome face tilted over, hinting for her to let go. Bo Jiu laughed, a hint of playfulness in her voice. Brother Mo, I bought Burger King and Coke. Let's play some games and sleep. I don't have a computer or a phone. Chin Mo's gaze was calm. Bo Jiu took a moment. Wait. With that, she went downstairs to the study room. She opened the drawer. There were at least a dozen phones inside. They were all different brands and models. These were her usual tools. She casually picked one up and tested it. The reaction wasn't bad. She connected to the wireless network and returned to the room. Brother Mo, you can use my phone, I'll use this. Chin Mo smirked. Aren't you afraid I'll contact someone? That's my alternate account, there's no one on it. You won't be able to contact anyone. Bo Jiu smiled, looking especially obedient. Chin Mo arched a brow at such a deceptive fox. He glanced at the game name on the phone screen, his lips twitching. Bo Jiu coughed lightly. Despite all her calculations, she had missed out on his nickname. Chin Mo is my little secretary? Chin Mo scoffed again. Bo Jiu could hear the mockery in his voice. Chin Mo's fingers slid across the screen. The things that the sugar daddy thinks about every day are no different from a dream. Bo Jiu thought to herself, I wanted to kidnap you but I still managed to kidnap you. I can even sleep later. How is it a dream? But Bo Jiu wasn't stupid enough to say these words. She sat on the sofa lazily, her black jacket still on her body. She took a straw and inserted it into the cola. Chin Mo sat beside her. What hero? Whatever, since Brother Mo is here, I can win without doing anything. Bo Jiu. He even noticed her peeping. Bo Jiu had an ulterior motive. She fought a beast and picked up the cola. The straw touched Chin Mo's lips. Young Master Chin didn't usually drink such things, but since it was sent over by a certain someone, it wasn't the same. He took 2 sips and said, come over to collect the kills. All right. Bo Jiu smiled when she saw the Almighty drinking the cola. She lifted her knife and released a skill on the beasts. She used her big move to climb over the wall and entered the crowd. She used her second skill to freeze the enemy. With Chin Mo's one-handed skill, she locked onto the enemy. The enemy sorcerer wanted to freeze her, but the moment she used her skill, Bo Jiu appeared behind her. The sound of a knife rang out. KO. The first HP was in her hands. When she turned back, she met the archer with low HP. She swung her knife. Double kill. Bo Jiu's HP dropped by half. The assassin in the bushes wanted to hit her with a stick. Right at this moment, Bo Jiu used her big move and jumped back into the defense tower. No one could catch her. That wasn't all. Shin Mo took the chance to use his big move and attract the enemy. Bo Jio turned back with her knife. There were 2 swishing sounds. 3 kill. The news from the middle lane shocked the other 3 teammates. But in their eyes, Fa Tan wasn't the strongest. After Bo Jio collected the kills, she turned to observe Shin Mo. She didn't forget to switch out of the game to check the time. When she entered again, she realized she was dead. Dead? Bo Jio arched a brow. The assassin shouldn't have revived. When did he come over to collect the kills? Shin Mo glanced at a certain someone. He turned and tapped on her screen. How does it feel to be killed by the defense tower? Bo Jio. It was better to be killed by the blue beasts. But she noticed something. After the Almighty finished speaking, he reached out and pulled open his shirt collar. Even his handsome face looked much better than usual. 3 minutes had passed. The drug should be starting to take effect. With that thought in mind, Bo Jio dashed into the crowd once more. But this time, she forgot to use her skills and position. She was instantly killed. Shin Mo tilted his head, his thin lips asking, "Are you a spy sent by the other party?" Bo Jio chewed on another fry, a hint of playfulness in her voice. "Brother Mo, I only died twice. Look at the bottom lane, I died 4 times. If you want to talk about who is the spy, it's me. My HP drops quickly when they attack me. Do you still want to win?" Shin Mo asked slowly. Bo Jio chuckled. "Yes." Shin Mo didn't reply. If he couldn't even tell her state, he couldn't be a criminal psychologist. She seemed distracted and he couldn't tell what she was thinking. The only thing Shin Mo could think of was the person she had contacted in the car before she went upstairs. This caused his fingers to pause for a moment. Just for a moment. The opponent's sorcerer had hit him with a fireball. On top of that, he used an ultimate move. The 3 of them had surrounded him. He definitely wouldn't be able to leave. He watched as the character fell on the screen. Shin Mo tugged his collar, as though that was the only way to ease his annoyance. However, his eyes were cold. Bo Jio was surprised that the Almighty had died. Logically speaking, even if it was done with one hand, the Almighty wouldn't be affected if he didn't leave the tower. Was it because of the drug? Bo Jio pondered over it. That was the only possibility. She smiled. It seemed like she was close to success. Shin Mo didn't know where his annoyance came from. But the player at the bottom lane was still shouting, "Fatten, don't send me off. Stay under the tower and don't come out when you practice your hero." A person who had died 6 times didn't have the right to say such things. But Shin Mo wasn't paying attention to it. His heart wasn't calm, which was why his lips were dry. He placed his phone down and reached for the cola beside him. After taking a few sips, he returned to the game. Bo Jio sat at the side, smiling brightly. It seemed like the drug had taken effect. Otherwise, according to the Almighty's habits, he wouldn't have taken the initiative to drink the cola. The game was a distraction. Moreover, Shin Mo was hiding something in his heart. When he realized that something was wrong, his side was already fighting against the Beast King and the opponent was fighting against him. He paused for a moment and furrowed his brows. He turned his gaze to the side and looked at the cola on the side. Chapter 11:15. Bo Jio noticed Shin Mo's gaze and started to feel guilty. Shin Mo started to feel thirsty. He wanted to raise his hand but realized he didn't have enough strength. He glanced up at the youngster and placed his phone down. His voice was still calm but there was a hint of hoarseness. "What did you put in the Coke?" Bo Jio shifted her gaze and looked up. She smiled and replied slyly, "It won't affect my health." "Heh." Shin Mo chuckled again, his palms heating up. "You've grown up." Bo Jio felt a little guilty. "Brother Mo, if it's too hot, do you want to take off your clothes?" Shin Mo didn't reply. He pushed her away and walked into the bathroom. He turned on the cold water and the water splashed onto his body. His black hair fell onto his forehead. His white shirt was half open and his collarbone could be seen clearly. What's more, the wet shirt stuck to his body, accentuating his figure even more. This was the scene Bojio saw when she walked in. Chin Mo had already turned off the shower. Through the mist, everything seemed hazy. Bojio felt a little regretful. It would have been better if she hadn't drugged him or asked for the antidote. When she saw the Almighty taking a cold shower, she felt that drugging him was a bad idea. Unexpectedly, the Almighty walked back to the bed, his voice coming over. Is this how Sugar Daddy does things? He only cares about drugging him and doesn't care about the consequences. I'll make you comfortable. Bojio thought for a moment before reaching out to push him onto the floor. The room was made of wood and covered with a soft black carpet. Hence, Chin Mo didn't feel any pain when he laid on the bed. But the words he was supposed to say were uttered by a certain someone. It made him want to rub his forehead. Bojio watched the Almighty's cold expression and didn't know where to start. Chin Mo continued to let her press on him. He arched a brow but didn't say anything. The receiver was still by his ear. The shadow guards were about to speak. Chin Mo lifted his hand and turned off the receiver's signal. The shadow guards were still listening. What's going on with young master? The black-bellied Chin Mo's thoughts were simple. He didn't want these people to disturb his sleep. As for Bojio, she laid down obediently under him. All right, she could be called obedient for the time being. In any case, the Almighty lying quietly under her made her heart itch. Bojio finally understood what it meant to be a femme fatale. He was indeed a demon. Especially at this time. What's the first step? Bojio muttered to herself. I should check the strategy first. Chin Mo's body was burning. He knew the effects of the medicine. If he was really unhappy, he could take a shower. He wanted to see how far someone could go. Who knew that he didn't even know what to do first? To think that he had taught her so much. It seemed that all her intelligence was used on playing games and playing on the computer. She was really naive in other aspects. Let's kiss him first, Bojio said, her eyes sparkling. Her smile was devilish and mischievous. Chapter 11:16. Chin Mo's entire body was burning. He knew the effects of the drug. If he really wasn't happy, a shower would solve it. He wanted to see how far she could go. Who knew, she didn't even know what to do. He had taught her so much. It seemed like all her intelligence was used on gaming and the computer. She was really naive in other aspects. Let's kiss him first, Bojio said, her eyes sparkling. Her smile was devilish and mischievous, but Bojio hesitated when the Almighty looked at her. Chin Mo's expression looked a little indifferent. His peach blossom eyes were very distinct, and there was a hint of coldness in them. He had a noble air that couldn't be offended. In order to make things seem more natural, Chin Mo tilted his head to the side when Bojio was about to kiss him. The kiss that should have landed on his lips ended up landing on the Almighty's chin. Bojio was slightly depressed at the unfavorable start. But it wasn't a huge blow to her sugar daddy. Who wasn't a proud little fairy? With the Almighty's looks, he had the right to be reserved. The second time. Bojio leaned forward again. Her thin lips finally landed on the right place. She touched his slightly cold lips lightly, savoring the unique warmth. The person beneath her didn't reject her, but he didn't seem moved. Bojio moved the kiss away. She glanced at the calm peach blossom eyes and leaned forward. She leaned over and whispered in his ear, Brother Mo, I've already confessed, but you're still unmoved. This is the only way. Gangster, you still have to find an excuse. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. Bojio stood up, her thin lips lifting. I'll help Brother Mo undress first. It's uncomfortable to wear this. Haven't you thought about the consequences of your actions? Chin Mo asked slowly. Bojo muttered, "You're leaving anyway." Her words were muffled. Chin Mo didn't catch her words clearly. He glanced at the person sitting on his waist. He reached out and pulled his shirt open. Chin Mo felt the heat on his body rising. It was a feeling any man would understand. However, a certain someone was very slow. He was good at flirting, but he didn't take care of the areas that he should. Chin Mo couldn't help but clench his right hand by his side, as though this was the only way he could control himself and not press her down. He couldn't be too presumptuous. After all, the Almighty wanted someone to take the initiative. Bojo was smart enough to know that medicine wasn't much of a threat to the Almighty. When she reached out, she didn't forget to cuff his uninjured hand to the foot of the bed. Chin Mo's eyes deepened. "If I were you, I would dispel your foolish thoughts, little Jio. Brother Mo, you're talking about locking you up." Bojo smiled mischievously. She leaned over and kissed the corner of Chin Mo's lips. She said righteously, "I'm afraid the medicine isn't safe. If that's the case, Brother Mo won't be able to escape." "Brother Mo, you have no idea how many times I've thought about it. You should just let me kiss you obediently without any resistance. Now that you're in this state, it's really tempting." This was the first time Chin Mo couldn't do anything to someone. He parted his lips and spat out, "You're dead meat. Brother Mo, look, I didn't even say a word when you did things to me previously." Bojo smiled. "Anyway, the winner takes all and the loser warms the bed. Brother Mo, be magnanimous." Chin Mo watched as she kissed him again. This time, it was on his collarbone. It was a seductive kiss. Chin Mo felt as though he was on fire. He watched a certain someone's fair and clean face and her actions. His breathing started to get messy. However, she wasn't conscious at all. She reached out and unbuckled his belt. "Brother Mo, be good, I'll be gentle." Bojo wanted to appease the Almighty since her methods were indeed despicable. In some romance novels, when the supporting female couldn't get the male lead, she would resort to drugging him. She hadn't expected that she would use it one day. If the Almighty was determined not to let her touch him, she would respect him. The effects of the drug probably made the Almighty less reserved. When she sensed Chin Mo's breathing, Bojo smiled. "Brother Mo, you want it too, right?" When the youngster said this, she tilted her body and whispered into his ear. It was filled with the scent of candy, tempting him to commit a crime. Chin Mo's throat rolled. He didn't want to wait any longer. He couldn't stand a certain someone either. With a single hand, he turned around and pulled her into his embrace. Bojo stilled, a trace of surprise flashing across her large, dark eyes. His next train of thought was interrupted by the kiss that landed on his face. It was a kiss that could suck all the air out of her and make her mind go blank. It was truly irresistible. Even her breathing was filled with his scent. It smelled so good that Bojo's hands softened. When he felt that it was about time, he left her lips, his voice unique. "You drugged me for this, right? This is the real kiss. What was that just now?" "Just a touch." Bojo could faintly hear his hot breath landing beside her ears. His deep voice carried a hint of mockery. "I've never seen someone as stupid as you." Bojo wanted to retort, but it was obvious that the Almighty wasn't going to give her the chance. The heat seemed to be contagious. Even through their clothes, the Almighty had the ability to captivate her soul. The numbness continued to spread. The temperature in the room rose. Chin Mo's voice was hoarse. "Release the handcuffs." Bojo knew he didn't like to be locked up. Hence, she released the handcuffs as though she was releasing a ferocious tiger. Chin Mo carried her up, pressing her against the soft blanket. It was probably due to the effects of the drug. That night, Chin Mo seemed to have completely let go. He didn't have any reservations, taking the person in his arms over and over again. The numbness never subsided. She listened to that person constantly calling her name. Bojo had to grab onto something to prevent the sound from coming out. Bojo. It was the Almighty's voice, slightly deep. Bojo. He seemed to be waiting for her response. She only responded with an N and was immediately swept into an extreme numbness. The classic European-style bed swayed her silver hair. Her snow-white skin was eye-catching, a form of visual enchantment. Chin Mo reached out and held onto the man's waist. He wanted to make sure that he was the only one in his eyes. The night sky darkened. The curtains were drawn. The moon didn't appear, but the temperature in the room didn't drop. It was just like the effects of the drug on Chin Mo's body. When the person was willing, the drug's effects would be amplified. Before Bojo fell asleep, she wondered if she had put too much powder in the cola. It was rare for her to have such a peaceful sleep. Hence, Bojo didn't know that after she closed her eyes, Chin Mo hugged her. Chin Mo hugged her. The bedsheets couldn't be used anymore, so he placed his windbreaker on the blanket. He lay on it and let her sleep in his arms. Idiot. The two words were filled with an unprecedented amount of love. His fingers brushed aside the stray hair on Bojo's forehead. Chin Mo moved, planting a kiss on her. This trip wasn't a loss. Given his personality, he wouldn't have been so proactive. In reality, the drug still lingered in Chin Mo's body. It was obvious that someone was too tired. When the sun was about to rise, Bojo was half asleep when she heard a low chuckle. Do you still want more? He didn't wait for her reply. The man began to move again. His movements were extremely gentle, so gentle that she felt as though she was the one being drugged. The next day. In order to prevent Grandfather Butler from knocking on the door. Before entering the room, Bojo had sent Grandfather Butler a message, asking him to come later. That night, both of them slept very soundly. Since Chin Mo was really drugged, he woke up later than Bojo. When Bojo opened her eyes, she felt a little guilty. When she saw the handsome face in front of her, she smiled. This person was hers again. There was nothing that couldn't be solved with a good night's sleep. If there was, she would sleep with him twice. From her perspective, the drugging last night had been a success. The only thing that wasn't successful was her soft-heartedness. She had unlocked the Almighty and lost her dominant position. But that didn't matter. As long as her goal was achieved. Bojo reached her hand out, wanting to push the Almighty's black hair away. But the next second, her fingers paused. Even if it was small. She had always worked with computers. Hence, she knew what it was. It was a small listening device. It was small enough to be placed beside his ear and hidden in his black hair. It was waterproof. These things usually came from the military. Bojo wasn't stupid. Such a small thing was enough for her to understand what was going on. Why did the kidnapping become so easy? It was because from the beginning to the end, everything had been within this person's calculations. Grandfather Butler had already reminded her to be more reserved as a girl. But she hadn't listened. She had forgotten that in his eyes, other than being herself, she had another identity, Z. It wasn't because her plan was flawless. Compared to him, she was just playing with an axe. Such a receiver would have an automatic positioning function. Ever since he had come to the castle, he had been searching for information about her. Bojo wasn't stupid. She knew it. But she hadn't expected that he would only know what he was doing. She didn't know that when he was doing it, he had already told others about his location. Bojo knew that sooner or later, he would leave. But at this moment. The moment she found the receiver. It was as though a basin of water had been poured over her. Her entire body felt cold. Chapter 11:17. She couldn't stay here anymore. It wouldn't matter if she was the only one here. But Grandfather Butler was here. For a family of hackers, it was basic to never expose themselves in front of others. Moreover, it was the Bo family. Bojo sat up, lowering her head to wear yesterday's clothes. When she glanced up, she had regained her usual expression. She had to inform Grandfather Butler to evacuate. As for the Almighty, his hand had been healed. She wouldn't stop him anymore. But, she had thought they would be together for a longer time. The youngster stood in front of the dressing mirror, looking at himself in the mirror. After about 10 seconds, he reached out his hand to press his fringe. Even though the corners of her lips were lifted, she didn't look like she was smiling. There was a hint of loneliness in her. However, that sense of desolation disappeared the moment she pushed open the door to the room. Because the old butler was in the living room. At this time, as a qualified butler, he was brewing his black tea. It was an English-style teacup with beautiful patterns. The old butler was an exquisite person, especially when it came to eating and drinking. Those who knew their stuff would definitely recognize the golden spoon in his hand and the handmade machine on the dining table. It was perfect for brewing coffee. But it was obvious that even though he was a local, he loved tea more. As the fragrance of the tea spread, the cheesecake on the dining table was ready. When the old butler saw Boggio, he held onto the teapot, looking like a butler from a vampire movie from the 19th century. He reached out to pull out the wooden chair. "Young lord, you must be hungry. Have some tea first." "All right." Boggio had never rejected her grandfather butler. She picked up the fork and cut a mouthful of the cheesecake. She stuffed a big mouthful, puffing up her face as she gave the old butler a thumbs up. The old butler broke into a smile. "Speaking of which, this high school student looks very similar to young lord. There's something different." Boggio reached out to point at her eyes, her words unclear. "This is black." "Oh, right," young lord's eyes were gray previously. The old butler glanced at her, nodding. Boggio took a sip of tea, smoothing it down before speaking in a clear voice. "I've seen the original owner's photo. In the past, she didn't have a tear mole by the side of her eye, which was rather strange. After it was changed to me, the tear mole became clearer. I was rather worried that someone would notice the difference. Fortunately, I came back early." She wasn't afraid of being exposed, but she couldn't explain to He Honghua that she wasn't her daughter. The old butler poured more tea into her cup, his voice raspy. "It's good that you're back." Boggio couldn't let go of the fifth path because grandfather butler was still around. She didn't come back often before. This was the longest time she had spent in the main family. There are a lot of people's information gathered here. There could not be the slightest mistake. There was a case recently. Boggio didn't push the blame onto Chin Mo. Instead, she started talking about the maiden's sacrifice. It was caused by the organization back then. That year, a lot of information was leaked. This time, we can't repeat the same mistake. We have to pack up the things here and grandfather butler has to move to a safer place. Hearing this, the old butler frowned. "There's no place safer than the main house, is there? This time, it's different." Boggio placed the teacup down. "This time, they are using the human heart. We can't predict the human heart. I'm worried that someone will leak the information." At the same time, in an apartment on the Fifth Path. In an apartment on Fifth Avenue, the girl sat in front of the computer. Her fingers tapped on the keyboard and her eyes were filled with venom. "Don't be so stubborn. As long as you tell me where Z is, your daughter will be fine. Of course, you can tell Z that I slept with you, but your daughter will kill me. Hee hee. Have you thought about the consequences of your actions?" The person on the other end of the computer didn't give up. The girl smiled. "What consequences can there be? Your daughter is still on my side. You people don't understand them. Let them play. Don't care if there's any meaning in their actions. You just have to care. Get her to study properly. What's so strange about your daughter becoming mine? I won't tell you where Z is." The fat man gritted his teeth. The girl's eyes dimmed. "Then wait and see your daughter kill someone." The fat man was also a hacker. But just like what the girl said, he didn't understand what young people were thinking. He really didn't understand. He also didn't understand why his daughter looked like a person he didn't recognize. The fat man still had his daughter's online preview on his computer. Her comments scared him as a father. She liked other people's things and treated them as her own. After being exposed, she didn't feel that she was wrong. She only felt that other people weren't generous enough. That was the beginning. The further it went, the more frightening it became. She felt that people who defended their rights were creating hype. She wanted to become popular for money. But she never thought that other people lost their lives just for justice. And what she was doing was killing it. Later on, she opened an account and went online to slander people. Just because the person she liked didn't speak according to her thoughts. She turned the truth upside down and spoke without thinking. The fat man felt a little regretful. He regretted all these years. He just wanted his daughter to live a better life. He never thought that one day, she would become like this. Another message came through QQ. It was a picture. In the picture, his daughter was in an online environment, talking with fervor and assurance. I just need her to do one thing for me to complete the entire murder process. I have to say that your daughter is really a good helper. This time, our target is the mother of the defender. The fat man's eyes narrowed. His hands on the keyboard tightened. Subconsciously, he wanted to contact the person. I advise you not to move. All your networks are under my surveillance. To be honest, it isn't easy to find hackers like you. If it wasn't for your daughter, I really wouldn't have been able to find a breakthrough. When the girl said this, her eyes were still gloomy. She really couldn't break through the legendary defense network, but so what? She couldn't let anyone die. She couldn't let her daughter become the murderer. The fat man clenched his fists and released them. His eyes were filled with pain. I don't know the specifics. I only know that the family is in an old castle. It is very hidden in the forest. I have only been there once and it was many years ago. You should also know that our young master is in charge now. Young master, heh. The girl typed. You better be telling the truth. The fat man typed a line of words. Now that things have reached such a stage, do I dare to lie to you? However, the fat man hid something. He knew the exact location. He said this to stall for time. But if he didn't say anything, the other party would definitely notice that he was lying. There are many castles in America. The girl laughed coldly. But do you think I can't find it? Oh right, I forgot to tell you. Your daughter has already made her move. At that moment, the fat man smashed his keyboard on the floor. In the end, his eyes turned red. He typed on the keyboard. It was a string of code. It wasn't an intrusion. It wasn't informing anyone. It was the self-destruction of the system. Once the system self-destructed, it meant that his identity would be removed. In other words, he was using the method of self-destruction to convey information. The girl didn't expect this. She took the information she received and informed her subordinates. Search all the castles around here. Filter out the people who might be Z within 2 days. Yes. A group of mercenaries replied to her. These people were all fugitives. They would do anything as long as they were paid. They were often active outside the borders. The girl wasn't just anyone. She was Fan Jia, who had successfully escaped previously. She had said that she would be back. But this time, she chose to take action here because the environment was more convenient for her. Z had ruined her plans time and time again. She had almost died because of it. If it hadn't been for Z, the maiden's sacrifice would have been completed. In the past, she had thought that according to her brother's plan, Z would have been eliminated. She hadn't expected her to still be alive. Other than her brother, no one else had seen Z before. She wasn't an exception. This time, she was going to witness Z's death with her own eyes. Also, that ungrateful young man who stole her man from Huaxia, she would let him know how powerful she was. She had thought that she would receive news from the Fu father and son soon. She hadn't expected them to be so slow. But she wasn't in a hurry. Once she found Z, she would deal with her private matters. Time trickled by slowly. In the castle. Just as Bojio was about to step out, an app on her phone rang. That noise instantly made her and the old steward stop what they were doing. It was too unusual. The last time she had heard such a sound was when the hacker world was in danger. But this time, Bojio looked at the flickering red dot. Her first reaction was to open her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She entered the system she had set up and locked onto the red dot that had self-destructed. The red dot would disappear after a minute. Hence, within this minute, Bojio had to find out what had happened before the self-destruction. When she tried to retrieve the information, her fingers paused. She narrowed her eyes. There was a firewall in the intrusion records. Bojio moved her left hand, avoiding the path. She typed in the code and started to search for the loophole. Found it. QQ. This was a dangerous infiltration method. If she wasn't fast enough, she would be detected. But it was still the same sentence. Speed was the only thing that couldn't be defeated. It was the same for a hacker's intrusion. Her fingers were so fast that only the crackling sounds could be heard in the room. She transformed into a bat on the internet and avoided all the dangers. Then, she found the loophole and copied the data. That wasn't the main point. She had to come out before the loophole was fixed. If not, her position would be completely exposed. 6 seconds. There were 6 seconds left. Bojio's fingers moved faster. Her silver hair fell down. Only her handsome and clean side profile could be seen. If Fatty was here, he would definitely clench his fists nervously. The virtual network gate was closing. Swoosh. She escaped the first gate. The third gate was about to close. Once it closed, Bojio would be locked inside. At this moment, the virtual bat increased its speed. It lowered its body and rushed forward. All that was left were its black feathers. K.O. That's right. She didn't just steal successfully. At that moment, Bojio left a mark at a place where the other party wouldn't be able to detect. The so-called mark was just a small code in the other party's source code. This was Z's unique technique. Very few people knew how to use it. In other words, if the other party made another move, Bojio would receive a response. When that happened, she would be able to lock onto the other party's position. However, this didn't make Bojio relax. That was because as long as a hacker had a plan, they wouldn't self-destruct. Self-destruction was the worst way to transmit information. This meant that she wasn't going to receive any good news. Bojio was most worried about the other party's safety. Young lord. The old butler walked over, his expression solemn. Bojio didn't say anything. She opened the source code that she had stolen and started to restore it. It was a chat record. The chat record made Bojio's eyes darken. The old butler frowned and let out a long sigh. Young master, you're right. This battle won't be easy for us. We have to protect the other party first. When Bojio closed her eyes, she could still remember that mother. She was walking near the train station, selling cigarettes. She stood up. I'll contact Hoshino now. Upstairs, Chin Mo stood at the corner. Even he didn't expect to hear this the moment he came out. This time, he just stood there. He thought that the youngster would notice him like before. But she didn't. The youngster seemed to be focused on something else. He picked up his phone, his voice getting further and further away. There was trust in his voice that he had never heard before. Hoshino, I need you. Chin Mo tightened his grip on the escalator. It was a little painful, but compared to this feeling, it was more of a dullness. It tugged at his heart. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. The tightness in his chest made him stop. He told himself. Something must have happened. Solving the problem was the key. Chin Mo walked back to his room and stood by the window for a while. He turned on the receiver. Go and find out what happened in the hacker world recently. Yes, get Fatty to find out. I want to know the news immediately. I'll be back tonight. The shadow guards. Young Master's voice didn't sound right. Were they thinking too much? That shouldn't be the case. Wasn't young Master supposed to be happy? After all, what did young Master Joe do yesterday? Why was he so depressed? Chapter 11:18. On the first floor of the castle. Bojo took her phone and walked to the basement. She told Hoshino everything that had happened. At the airport. The man who was going through the security paused. Z, don't forget that Chin Mo is still with you. Bojo's fingers paused. It won't affect me. All right. Hoshino stood tall with a brown leather watch on his wrist. He glanced at the time. I still have an hour before my flight. What do you need me to do? Bojo glanced up. Her actions were strangely handsome. Come back and destroy the enemy. Yes. Hoshino smiled slowly and called out, Young Lord. The old butler knew that Bojo was going to be busy. Usually, when something like this happened, she had to do a lot of work in advance. This day, Bojo was in the basement for the entire afternoon. Swoosh. She pulled open the things in front of her. It was a row of drones and a small smart car. If one took a closer look, they would realize that the things tied to the smart car weren't simple. Anyone who was smart would be able to tell that Bojo was making adjustments. The laptop was opened and all the devices were connected through the network. Finally, it was synchronized to her tablet. In the Bo family's house, many things looked normal, but behind the bookshelves, there was a hidden layer. There were rows of skateboards. There were at least 5 or 6 of them. The hacking system had self-destructed. She had to inform someone about this. Bojo had made the firewall personally, which meant that she was the only one who could contact every hacker. The red signal was planted in the firewall. After seeing the signal, in the school, a boy who was studying advanced mathematics pushed his spectacles. He placed the book aside and placed his fingers on the keyboard. Someone at the side teased him. Hey, old 5, aren't you reading your book? My child is finally enlightened and knows how to watch porn. The boy didn't say anything. The way he avoided the crowd did seem like he was watching porn. But in reality, he opened the signal. His small brows furrowed. He replied with 2 words. Got it. Other than the boy, many others replied at the same time. Those people were all hackers. Without being exposed, everyone sat in front of the computer and began to search with their fingers. Hackers couldn't involve reality. Once it involved reality, they had to protect each other. Now, someone was forced to self-destruct. Of course, they wouldn't sit still. In an instant, the signal of the entire firewall was scattered all over the network. This way, if anyone had any problems, the other person would know immediately. Not only that, the other party might not know. Once the marked network system was activated, they would immediately lock it down automatically. That's why some people say that you can mess with anyone but hackers. Time passed little by little. Chin Mo sat at the dining table. It had been a quiet day for him. A certain guy didn't appear. He didn't receive any more confessions. All he had was the steak and afternoon tea that the old butler had brought to him when it was time. It was obvious that the old butler was much faster than before. Chin Mo glanced at the time on the clock. He did not know where that person had gone. However, he knew very well that it was very difficult to sit in one place and wait for someone. Chin Mo glanced at the photo on the bookshelf again. This time, he didn't reach for it. Instead, he tapped his fingers on the surface. The shadow guards knew that young master had been waiting for news and immediately said, "Young master, I've checked but I'm not sure of the details. There are rumors that the other party is going to make a big move. It seems like a hacker was killed by an unknown organization. It might be a backstabbing." "It's not a backstabbing." Chin Mo narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "I need to leave this place to check on something. Call the police here and cooperate with me to arrest someone." When the shadow guards heard this, they froze for a moment. What did young master mean? Who was he going to arrest? Young master Jiao who kidnapped him? Dusk started to fall. The old butler had already transferred a portion of the information that needed to be transferred. Actually, it wasn't difficult to pack it up. He didn't need to bring anything but his tea set and the cutlery that young lord liked to use. This was the most important thing for a qualified butler. Of course, there were some information that would expose young lord's information. Basically, he destroyed everything that could be destroyed. Those that couldn't be destroyed were brought along with him. That included the photo. When he was doing all this, the old butler, who was dressed in a suit, was very calm. In between, he didn't forget to take a look at the red wine pig trotters he made in the kitchen. Young lord loved to eat meat. She was prepared to nourish her brain after doing these things. Using pig trotters to nourish her brain was also a specialty of the Bo family. Bo Jiao liked to squat on the floor and play with these things. She would eat a few mouthfuls of meat and check the data. She wore a pure red t-shirt and turned to light a cigarette. When she held the cigarette in her mouth, her handsome side profile was hard to tell if she was a man or a woman. It could be seen that she was very busy. She was so busy that she would stretch out her hand to twist her neck occasionally. In the end, she was a little tired. She supported herself with one leg and closed her eyes. She seemed to be sleeping. Upstairs. Chin Mo opened the windows. It was hard to imagine that the tool in his hand was a fork. Moreover, when he was doing these things, he didn't make any noise. When he walked to the balcony, he stepped on the wall and landed on the ground. His movements were very light. The only inconvenience was that he couldn't use any strength in his injured hand. Chin Mo chose this time after a long period of observation. Because at this time, the old butler would often be in the kitchen. The sound of cooking in the kitchen wasn't soft. In addition, the soundproofing of the castle was good. This meant that no one would notice if he left at this time. After all, Chin Mo glanced up at the hidden camera in the rose. Ever since he came here, it had been switched off. Chin Mo walked to the front of the car. In his pocket was the car key he had gotten from the youngster. With the car key and voice authentication, he was 80% sure that he could start the Lamborghini in front of him. When the button was pressed, the navigation system vibrated. Chin Mo said faintly, "I like you, Chin Mo, identifying password, password is correct." The navigation system vibrated again. The car door opened automatically. Chin Mo entered sideways. The sound was very soft. He manually increased the speed and drove out of the castle in an instant. Right at this moment, there was a ding sound. A signal appeared on the computer screen. Bo Jiao, who was holding the remote control, was woken up by the sound. After waking up, she watched as the red dot moved further and further away from the castle. The light in her eyes dimmed. She had always known that he would find a chance to leave. Bo Jiao knew that this place couldn't trap the Almighty. She had been prepared. But when it really happened, she would still think that it would be good if the Almighty was willing to stay by her side. It wouldn't be to investigate her and he would just stay by her side. But on second thought, she was still too naive. After the Almighty found out about her identity, he wouldn't be like before. Creak. The door opened. The old butler walked in. He had wanted to tell Bo Jiao about the matter, but when he saw the red dot on the computer screen, he reached for the teapot with his gloved hand and poured another cup of tea. "Young lord, you know everything. It's time for the Almighty to leave." Bo Jiao's words seemed to be directed at herself. If the Almighty doesn't go back, movie Queenan will be anxious. Besides, he has to deal with the case. The old butler felt uncomfortable if he didn't ask. What's so good about young Master Chin? Bojo stood up and smiled. Grandfather Butler. MMH? He's the Lewis that you mentioned. Bojo smiled. The pet that I always talk about. The old butler stilled, his eyes filled with shock since he hadn't thought about it before. He hadn't known that the little boy was related to the Yin family. Back then, he had been taking care of his young lord in the castle and had only heard about the past. He had only heard that his name was Lewis. How could he have guessed that it was the Qin family from China? The old butler frowned. But looking at his behavior, he doesn't seem to remember you, young master. He doesn't even have an impression of your English name. Your interactions during this period of time have really affected young master's judgment of a person. He has always preferred to use his real name and doesn't like to use his English name. He only used it a few times during the galas and never used it after that. Bojo glanced over. As for the rest, he did a special mission and after that, he lost almost all his childhood memories. It's normal that he doesn't remember me. The old butler didn't say anything. He knew deep down. If it was the Lewis that his young lord had always talked about when they were young, his young lord wouldn't be able to resist. That fellow should really read his young lord's diary. As an elder, there were some things that Bojo didn't need to explain for the old butler to understand. Moreover, he was a doctor. Selective amnesia meant that this person was psychologically traumatized. If he forcefully recovered, it would mean tearing open the wound deep in his heart. Moreover, that person's identity was destined to be different from his young lord's. This was probably the reason why his young lord didn't tell him the truth. As Z. She shouldered the responsibility of not going against the rules. Even if that would lead to darkness and loneliness for the rest of her life. The old butler glanced at the screen again. Little Blackie didn't activate the alarm system, which meant that his young lord had changed the settings. What a pity. He had done so much. The other party might not have noticed. Just as he was thinking about this, another sound came from the other computer. Bojo placed the remote control in her hand and supported herself with one hand on the table. She flipped over and sat on the chair elegantly. She looked at the message displayed on the screen and her gaze deepened. Then she glanced up at the clock hanging on the wall. It seemed like she wouldn't be able to wait for Hoshino. The other party moved quickly. From the information, he had already filtered out 3 castles. This set was in the other party's main search area. At such a time, time became more important. But as an intelligent navigation system that loved to talk about life, what was she most afraid of? She was most afraid of the sudden silence in the car. Hence, following the principle of divine assistance, the intelligent navigation system fluctuated and showed a curve. Hello, Master's little vixen. I feel that I need to introduce myself. My name is Lamborghini Blackie. In order to give you a better driving experience, I can help you with the detailed route navigation analysis. Little vixen. Chin Mo turned the steering wheel with one hand and lifted his eyelids. Even if he didn't have eyes, little Blackie, who could analyze people's emotions from their voices, felt that the car was a little cold. He said decisively, of course, the title, Little Vixen, is Master's nickname for you. I understand your feelings. After all, you were just drugged and would still be angry. Before Master drugged you, I stopped her. After all, it wasn't a good idea. It was undeniable that little Blackie was very flexible in this aspect. But what little Blackie didn't expect was, oh. Is that so? The man's voice didn't change at all. I quite like it when your master drugged me. Little Blackie, as a car navigation system, this was the first time it was speechless. At this moment, what should it reply? Let it use the powerful network to search. Unfortunately, before little Blackie could react, Chin Mo opened his mouth again. Chin Mo added, of course, I prefer being tied up by your master. You helped me a lot in this aspect, but what you did afterwards wasn't very wise, such as stopping her from drugging me. Little Blackie, Master, the little vixen you like is so scary. He isn't a little vixen, he is a big devil. In the future, when your master asks you any questions. Chin Mo moved his fingers. Don't stop her. Otherwise, I will think that you like to be washed. Little Blackie's intelligence system collapsed. How did this man know that it had been washed many times by Master? Open your recent driving record. Chin Mo's thin lips moved slightly as he waited for the red light. At this moment, the intelligence system was strict. Sorry, young Master Chin, you don't have the authority to view it. Is that so? Chin Mo laughed. Little Blackie felt an inexplicable chill in its body. However, it was as firm as the system was. It's fine if you don't want to say. Chin Mo's voice was calm. I just want to know who she saw in the past 2 days. If he was a human, he might not be able to hear the emotions in his words. But Little Blackie was intelligent. It immediately received the signal and replied, Young Master Chin, you don't have to be jealous. My master thinks about how to sleep with you every day. No one has seen it before. Sleeping with you is what she wants to do the most. Chin Mo arched a brow. Black Lamborghini. Go ahead. Chin Mo asked slowly, how does she want to sleep with me? She has done the strategy and is especially serious. Master also said that Chin Mo is the only beauty in the world. It's a pity she can't sleep with him. Little Blackie wouldn't hold back when it came to small talk. Basically, it's about sex. But Master said that sex isn't reliable because in the end, she will be the one being sex. Words to the readers, be careful with the plot. 4 in 1. Thank you for the monthly tickets. Chapter 11:19. Little Blackie thought that it would say so much. The other party would definitely have some response. However, the air suddenly became quiet again. This was the first time Little Blackie couldn't analyze the emotions of humans. Master, tell me the truth. Where did you find such a big demon? Time passed slowly. At this moment, 5 black cars passed by from the west on another road. It was obvious that the people in the cars weren't good people. It wasn't that people with scars were bad people. It was mainly because of their gazes. There were many animals on this road. However, when they drove past, they didn't care whether they would hit the cicada deer or the birds that were flying in the sky. There were many bushes in this area, but there were very few people. Have you confirmed the location? Where are we going? One of them chewed gum in his mouth. He was wearing a black combat uniform and had a gun on his shoulder. It was legal to own a gun overseas. Moreover, they were in the suburbs. What's the rush? They will pay us anyway. The person who spoke was driving. He wore sunglasses and there was a scar under his eyelid. But, are we really going to do it? We'll do it for money. No, haven't you heard that? You can go against anyone but Z. If that's the case, no one will sell us information in the future. What are you afraid of? As long as we do it without anyone knowing, no one will know that we did it. Someone glanced over. Leopard, are you still holding a grudge against Z for sending you to prison a few years ago? F***ck, I only slept with a little girl at that time. That Z is really a busybody. The person called Leopard sneered. His eyes were filled with bloodthirst. Now that I'm out, it's time for Z to pay the price. I still feel that it's dangerous to act rashly. Maybe we should reconsider. Kos, do you mean that you want to betray our new organization? Leopard turned around and glared at Kos viciously. Kos's fingers froze. He could clearly see the murderous intent in his partner's eyes. He wanted to use his gun to protect himself. However, someone beat him to it and shot him in the chest. Then, the person pushed the car door open and pushed the wide-eyed Kos out of the car. This is the result of hesitation. Leopard retracted his gaze, determined to win. Continue. Our new organization isn't afraid of anything. Originally, Koss and Leopard were on equal footing in this group of mercenaries. But now, these people knew that they had to listen to Leopard. Moreover, they also felt that Koss no longer had the sharpness of the past. So what if the other party was the king of hackers? Once the true location of the other party was found, the king of hackers would be no different from being crippled. After all, no matter how great a hacker was, he was only good on the internet. Once he left the internet, what was the use? If they could really destroy Z, their value in the industry would also double. Even if they didn't succeed, they wouldn't be blamed. After all, they had an organization behind them. No matter how he thought about it, it was a profitable thing, so why wouldn't he do it? Leopard, hurry up and ask for information. I can't wait to kill them all. Wait. Leopard held the receiver and smiled viciously. Found it. North. This was bound to be a slaughter. Sitting in front of the computer, Fan Jia glanced at the locked castle, her lips curling upwards. She wanted to see that person die with her own eyes. Fan Jia sat in the last car. She wouldn't alight. She would only post the mission on the computer. Leopard was addicted to drugs and was easy to control. After all, he used to be her brother's man. She trusted him before. Anyone who was her brother would have been hypnotized in the past. In that case, it would be much easier to use him. Fan Jia glanced at the screen again. Her gaze was filled with venom. Once this person died, she would take over the entire hacker world. Z, the obstacle that had been hindering her all this time. There were only 2 families living around the castle. The 2 families didn't know why. The old butler, who was rumored to be a weirdo, actually knocked on their door in the afternoon. He was still wearing a well-ironed suit, a pocket watch, and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He looked like an old noble deacon. He was holding a tray in his hand, and his smile was very appropriate, giving off a very elegant feeling. These are freshly baked cookies. The children should like them very much. However, if it's convenient, it's better for you to plan a trip this afternoon. The vacation can be for 3 days. Our master received news that there will be bandits coming. Bandits? The female owner inhaled deeply. She looked at him as if he was joking. What era was this? How could there be bandits? At this moment, the male owner walked over. After hearing this, he thought for a moment and said to the female owner, "Go pack your things." "Hey, Jack." The female owner still felt that it was ridiculous. Jack smiled. "This is the first time our neighbor is here. We should listen to him. Honestly, I feel that it isn't simple for them to live in that castle. Look around, what else is there apart from our farm? Pack your things. It's good for the children to go out and play." The female owner shook her head and left. The old butler was about to leave. However, his pants were tugged by a little girl. The old butler lowered his head. Whenever he met such a small child, he would mysteriously become serious. Luckily, the little girl mustered up her courage and placed a letter in his hand. "This is for little brother. Please help me tell him to wait for me to grow up. I will marry him. I really like his drone." The old butler smiled. The little brother that this child was talking about was the young master? "I'm afraid your wish won't come true." "Why?" The little girl was very disappointed. At this moment, a little boy walked over and didn't speak. The old butler continued, "Because she has someone she likes. Also, she's like you, a princess." The little girl was obviously stunned. When her eyes widened, she looked really cute. However, she wasn't as cute as when the young master was young. The old butler thought to himself. He still remembered the first time he picked the young master up. The young master was wearing a set of clothes with a little tiger on it. She held a small keyboard in her hands and looked up at him. She wasn't scared by the seriousness on his face at all. She wasn't afraid of the scar on his face either. Her eyes were big and round, black and clear. "Grandfather Butler, this is my welcome gift to you. A piece of candy." That was the first time he received a gift from a child. After all, many people would be scared to tears by him. But the young master had always been alone from the beginning. For a long time, her playmate was the small keyboard in her arms. She even told him with a serious face that this keyboard was different from the others. This was the one that her pet had disassembled and pressed on for her. Until the keyboard couldn't be used anymore. The young master dragged a teddy bear and watched as the garbage truck took it away. At that time, young Lord looked at him and said, "Actually, I secretly left him an address, but he didn't come looking for me. Grandpa Butler, do you think my pet is angry with me? He really likes to get angry, and I always like to provoke him. He definitely can't tell if I'm joking or if I'm serious." Now, the young master had grown up. She watched as that person walked away. One could imagine her feelings. The old butler looked at the tall figure standing in front of the window. He paused for a moment before walking over. "I've already informed him. He probably won't implicate innocent people." "That's good." Bojo retracted her gaze. Actually, her thoughts were still wandering. When she pushed the door open, her gaze landed on the wooden chair subconsciously. It had only been 2 to 3 days and the Almighty liked to sit there. He must have jumped from the window. He even called her a wall-climbing student. The Almighty's wall-climbing skills were probably on par with hers. Bojo lowered her lids and looked at the traces left behind. She smiled and turned back. She reached out to wear her mask, her gaze dark and penetrating. At the same time, everyone in the black car had loaded their guns with bullets. The leader had a murderous look on his face. "Let's go, brothers." As they drove forward, there was some fog. That wasn't all. They wanted to kill someone secretly so they couldn't drive in. It only took 15 minutes to reach the castle. It wasn't far and they didn't want to alert the enemy. Fan Jia lighted as well, holding her notebook in her hands. 9 o'clock. "You aren't your brother, don't order me around." Leopard turned and glanced at her. A cold glint flashed past Fan Jia's eyes. "You seem to have forgotten what my brother said before he left." Leopard stiffened. "All right, you're in command. Don't go in a single direction. Block all the paths around the castle and don't let Z escape. Also, I want to see how he looks like." Fan Jia narrowed her eyes. "Besides, I heard that Z is an expert in disguise. Don't let anyone you meet, even if it's an ordinary passerby, kill them all." "Sure." In the eyes of this group of people, human lives were worthless. It wasn't an exaggeration to call them outlaws. Some people would be righteous even in the underworld. Righteousness meant that they wouldn't touch children. Among all the criminals in prison, people like Leopard were the ones they looked down on the most. But he blamed everything he had suffered on Bojo. In his heart, if it wasn't for Z, those people wouldn't have found him. Moreover, he had done things cleanly. The little girl had been scared out of her wits. She couldn't even testify as there wasn't any crucial evidence. He was about to be released without any charges. It was all Z's fault. Why did she have to interfere? He had thought of using the same method to send Z to prison. He had even worked with some detectives who wanted to make a contribution. But Z was too hard to catch. Now, he finally had a chance. He changed his mind. He wouldn't let Z die so easily. He had to humiliate this person enough, and then shoot him dead with one shot. There were 5 cars. They had a complete set of equipment. Almost every one of them had at least 3 guns. There were a total of 15 of them and they were all mercenaries. They approached their destination silently. The quiet castle was the same as before. At this time, the pigeons would land in the courtyard and eat the food that had been scattered there. White roses bloomed on the vines and extended to the other side of the castle. Faintly, they could hear people making pastries. They didn't seem to notice the danger around them. At this moment, Leopard had reached the courtyard. He smiled. "Come on, boys. Let's give Z a surprise." The person standing next to him threw a grenade in after hearing his words. There was a loud bang. Leopard carried his gun and entered with his men. He fired at the inside of the door. The actions of this group of people were very barbaric. The pigeons flew up in fright. The female owner, who was already far away from the surroundings of the castle, sat in the car and frowned. "What's that sound? Mommy, is it little brother's house releasing fireworks? Oh. I should have stayed behind. That way, I can watch little brother." The little girl ate the biscuits. The male owner's fingers paused. "Mei Lin, prepare the gun." "Okay." In foreign countries, some people with farms had the right to carry guns. The female owner wasn't stupid. She could hear that the sound just now wasn't simple. She turned and looked behind her. "Is it really okay?" The male owner didn't say anything. He had a bad feeling. However, he couldn't be sure. He didn't know who the owner of the castle had offended. The smoke caused by the small explosives dissipated. More than 10 people carried their guns and looked around. They didn't see anyone. The tea on the table was still steaming. The temperature hadn't dissipated. There were also the biscuits on the table and the silver fruit plate on the ground. Everything showed that there was someone in the castle. At this moment, the person beside him suddenly pointed in the direction of the second floor. "There's a figure there. Second floor, by the window. Trying to escape." Leopard narrowed his eyes and gestured behind him. The few of them went upstairs in an instant. The two on the left and right guarded the bedroom door. Leopard kicked the door open and entered. He raised his gun and pointed it at the figure behind the curtain. He smiled. "Z, come out. Let's have a good talk. I didn't expect the famous Z to be afraid. Aren't you very arrogant?" The figure didn't move. Leopard scoffed. "Looks like you want me to invite you out. What king of hackers? Without the internet, you're just useless." As he spoke, Leopard raised his gun and aimed at the figure's long legs. There was a loud bang. Everyone's expression changed. This sound wasn't right. Leopard took a big step forward and reached out to pull the curtain. The person standing there wasn't a living person. It was a humanoid model. When he got closer, it said, "Huh? Who are you calling useless?" Chapter 11:20. Leopard took a big step forward and reached out to pull the curtain. He saw that the person standing there was not a living person at all, but a humanoid model. When he approached, it even said, "Who are you calling trash?" When the mercenaries saw the model, their expressions changed. They turned green and felt indescribably embarrassed. Coupled with the sound, everyone understood that they had been tricked. Leopard was the most furious. He swept the model furiously. "Where is Z?" Leopard pressed the Bluetooth earpiece beside his ear. His words were directed at Fan Jia. This model must be controlled by Z using the internet. Find Z. Fan Jia knew that she had to find the person. However, when she entered the internet area, she realized that she couldn't break through the firewall. She couldn't find the person. Suddenly, a red dot flashed. Fan Jia immediately pressed the lock button. "First floor. First floor?" One of them frowned. "We just came from the first floor. We didn't see anyone." "He's on the first floor." Fan Jia narrowed her eyes. Z made a defense, but there are so many machines. There will definitely be loopholes. Just now, Z wanted the model to speak and he had to give the command first. In this way, Z's position would be exposed. "I can find that spot in an instant." Z is on the first floor. The mercenaries glanced at each other. "Go downstairs," Leopard ordered. The mercenary closest to the door had just walked out of the bedroom when he saw an electric toy car that we used to play with when we were young. The only difference was that this toy car looked much cooler. It was probably made of a different material. What is this? The mercenary frowned. He was about to lift his leg when a loud bang was heard. He and the other 2 mercenaries behind him were blasted from the 2nd floor. He and the 2 people behind him were blasted down from the 2nd floor. Their necks were crooked and they never got up again. F***ck. Leopard cursed. Where the hell is Z? Also, aren't you a hacker? Can you make these D***MN things stop? Fan Jia was frustrated. I'm thinking of a way. You guys can avoid them. Leopard cursed again. When he walked down, he had just reached the staircase when a small toy car ran over. The car was a real replica with the Land Rover logo. It had a valiant and high-spirited air. When all the mercenaries saw the small toy car, they stopped in their tracks in an instant. They didn't even dare to take a big step forward. It was a classic scene. The remaining 10 or so people were trying to find a way to avoid the small toy car. Leopard used one hand to support himself on the stairs beside him and jumped down. However, at this moment, someone pointed outside the window. One of them suddenly pointed outside the window. His eyes were wide open, shaking back and forth. The mercenaries all looked in the direction their companions were pointing. Their eyes met with the drones that flew up like dragonflies and circled around the castle, eyeing them covetously. It was Bojio's voice, lazy and mischievous. Tisk, stupid people can't be cured. Did you think I would place all the mechanisms in the toy car? Who are you looking down on, Leopard? Leopard would never forget this voice. Back then, this was the person who had sent him to prison. He had almost been unable to escape and had even been sentenced to death. I seem to have forgotten to welcome you. Bojio was dressed in a black leather jacket. She had a pair of earphones on her ears. Her lips were curved upwards. Beneath her silver hair was a beautiful face. Don't worry, you will definitely like the feast. Leopard was about to speak. There was a swoosh. The drones gathered together. Every one of them was aimed at a single point. Leopard's expression changed. He shouted, "Move aside." But it was too late. The sound of a machine gun rang out. It swept across the area. With the crisp sound of glass shattering, 3 or 4 of the mercenaries were gone. These mercenaries were skilled. That was why they had been able to dodge in that instant. But even if they had managed to dodge, they would have been severely injured. They leaned against the sofa or the wall, not daring to lift their heads. No one could go head to head with the drones. They had thought that they could avoid them by hiding under the sofa. But in the next second, the drones seemed to have seen them. The drones seemed to have seen where they were. They circled around the sofa and flew above their heads. Asterisk 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 F asterisk CK. Leopard cursed. He was like a rat that was running away in a panic. Bojio's fingers flew across the keyboard. She had switched on a total of 4 computers. The image on each computer was the scene in the living room. There were even surveillance cameras around the castle. Looking at the scene, her lips curled up. It's been a year since we last met, and some of you have become more daring. Didn't anyone tell you that us hackers won't go against anyone in the underworld? But if you want to go against us and come to my place to cause trouble, then don't even think about going back. With that, Bojio moved her fingers. The drones changed their direction again. They started sweeping towards the mercenaries who wanted to shoot the drones. Leopard broke out in a cold sweat. He leaned against the wall. Even his breathing had changed. Someone was starting to feel afraid. He said to Leopard, "Boss, why don't we go back? Z is right. We shouldn't go against the hackers." "Shut up." Leopard narrowed his eyes. "Find Z." At this moment, Fan Jia said, "Cameras, there are cameras in the house. Shoot them down and the drones won't be able to find your location." Leopard looked up at the rotating cameras. He raised his gun, rolled, and shot down one of the cameras. Swoosh! One of the images on Bojio's side turned white. She raised a brow. Her expression didn't change. But in the living room, shooting down the camera would indeed create a blind spot. The drones in the castle weren't that advanced. Leopard could finally stand up straight. He took the opportunity when the drones seemed to have lost their target. He raised his gun and fired. There were 2 sounds of gunshots. 2 of the drones fell to the ground. The firepower was greatly reduced. The remaining 4 mercenaries also raised the guns in their hands and took the opportunity to shoot down the other 2. This meant that there were only 4 drones floating in the air. These people were all mercenaries. They had extraordinary battle experience. They reacted quickly and stood in the blind spot. That was where the cameras couldn't see them. They raised their guns and shot down another drone that tried to get close. Bang! Bang! As the last drone landed, a destructive smile appeared on Leopard's face again. There was a hint of murderous intent in it. Z, your last weapon is gone. Aren't you going to come out? There was no sound. After a burst of smoke, the castle became very quiet. However, the quieter it was, the more vigilant the people were, the more alert they would be. Bojio smiled. She held a metal rod in her hand and wore a black mask. Then she lifted her long legs and sat on a black tomahawk. Before she left, she pressed her finger down. The drone that had fallen to the ground suddenly exploded with a loud noise. The 5 mercenaries, who were still feeling smug, were blasted far away. Leopard, who had just boasted, felt dizzy. He swayed back and forth. He wanted to stand up. One of the mercenaries who wasn't injured shouted, "Boss." Before he could raise his head, the sound of a motorcycle came from his right. It wasn't coming from the first floor. It came from the middle of the forest. It lifted the front wheels and rushed into the living room. Then it raised its metal rod. It waved it elegantly. There was a loud bang. Leopard was knocked to the ground by the stick. It was so painful that he almost stopped breathing at that moment. He shouted, "Shoot!" But in reality, when the mercenaries saw the black motorcycle rushing towards them, his fingers were already numb from the shock. He didn't know where the youngster got her viciousness from. Before he could even react, an iron rod was already in front of him. When Bojio did this action, the moment she swung the rod, there seemed to be a sharp gust of wind. Her jacket flew up along with it. He was dressed in a black leather suit and looked very cool. Coupled with his silver hair, he looked very handsome. The moment the mercenary fell, the deepest impression he had was the pair of deep and pure eyes under the black mask. It was too dark. It was so dark that he could only feel the indifference in it. He remembered the warning they had received before they came. That warning was like this: "You can offend anyone but young Lord Z of the hacker world." But they didn't care. Wasn't he just a powerful person on the internet? Could he be more powerful than them in real life? But now, the mercenaries regretted it. They were wiped out. There were more than 10 of them and they entered the castle. They were beaten up by a single person and didn't even have the strength to retaliate. In the hall, Bojio held the handlebars of the motorcycle with one hand and stopped with a beautiful swing. One of her long legs stretched out and the tip of her foot was on the ground. She looked down at the mercenaries lying on the ground. At that moment, they felt that they weren't looking at a hacker but a Grim Reaper from a comic. A Grim Reaper with an outstanding aura and holding a metal rod. Bojio exerted force with her left hand and the motorcycle slid forward. She stopped in front of Leopard. "Someone like you is actually alive. It seems like throwing you in jail isn't enough." Z. Leopard hated this person to the core. At this moment, even his shout was filled with anger. His chest was heaving up and down as though he was going to fight someone with all his might. Bojio didn't get down from the motorcycle. She just looked at him and said calmly, "You're not convinced? Hold it in." Leopard narrowed his eyes. He seemed to have realized something. He wanted to continue stalling for time, but his hand touched a gun. He was about to raise his hand. Bo Jiao swung the rod again. This time, it hit his wrist. There was a crisp sound. Then, she swung the rod again. Leopard was in so much pain that his body curled up. He broke out in cold sweat and his entire body twitched a few times. He lay there and didn't get up again. In the end, there was only one mercenary left. The mercenary was extremely afraid. He should have listened to Kos. He shouldn't have barged in. He would definitely die too. Go back and tell the person who hired you that they don't have to look for me anymore. I will go and look for them. The mercenary heard the sound of the metal rod sliding across the floor. He looked at the tall and straight youngster standing against the light. When he opened his mouth, the taste of blood filled his mouth. He didn't dare to make another move even though the gun was right beside his hand. The mercenary knew very well that the girl who had instructed them to follow behind them must have escaped. They thought that it was foolproof and that they would be able to quietly destroy Z's nest. But who would have thought that they would be the ones being destroyed? That wasn't all. They didn't even see each other's faces. The mercenary watched as the pure black tomahawk made another turn. Just like when it came, it was extremely swift and fierce. The only thing that could be seen was the gust of wind behind the youngster the moment he took off his black mask. The mercenary's thoughts were right. When things were too late, Fan Jia had already escaped in the car. Fan Jia had already fled in her car. It could be described as deathly pale. It could only be described as deathly pale. She also didn't expect that Z would be so cunning. When she was attacking the network, Z showed her a fake IP. She didn't expect Z to be so cunning. When she was attacking the network, Z showed her a fake IP. Fan Jia had always thought that Z was on the first floor, but in reality, Z wasn't even in the castle. Fan Jia had seen the figure jump out. From the start, she had wanted to move, but she realized that everything was too fast. Every time the metal rod landed, she could almost hear the sound of bones breaking. She couldn't handle such skills. She had thought that Leopard's sneak attack would succeed, but Fan Jia tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Her gaze was dark. The more Z behaved like this, the more she hated him. She remembered what her brother had said. That year, in order to kill Z, her brother had used many methods. After that, he had left many traps just to clear this obstacle. However, Z's psychological defense was very low. She wasn't like Qin Mo. If Qin Mo hadn't appeared at that time to block the hypnosis for Z, Z would have been crippled. Hence, her brother had always been afraid of Qin Mo. Even after being hypnotized, he was still able to control himself at that moment. But the past was the past. Now was the present. In Qin Mo's heart, the most important person to him was already dead. The most important person to him was already dead, which meant that he had a psychological defect a long time ago. She had to think of a way. She had to think of a way. She had to get Qin Mo first. When the time came, she would use Qin Mo to deal with Z. Someone must have leaked the information for this operation. The information couldn't have been leaked from their side. Could it be that hacker? Fan Jia's gaze turned vicious. She had really thought too little. She hadn't expected that a person could use a special method to send out a signal before he died. They must have had a special method. Otherwise, she would have been able to discover it when she was monitoring the other party's network. No matter what, she wouldn't let Z continue to live. It would be best for Qin Mo to deal with Z. Chapter 11:21. In the distance, the last ray of light disappeared. The surroundings of the castle returned to its original state. It was still covered with trees. There was only a pure black tomahawk passing through the sunset on the straight asphalt road. One could vaguely hear the sound of clothes fluttering in the wind. On this day, all the hackers sent out a declaration of war. They would never sell information to the organization that planned the maiden's sacrifice. From today onwards, they would never stop tracking the organization. Fan Jia, who had been driving away in a hurry, hadn't realized the consequences of her actions. Until a call came in. His voice was deep. "Before you went, I told you not to make a move on Fifth Avenue. If you make a move there, you won't be able to gain anything. I also told you not to attempt to capture Z. Now that you're doing this, it seems like we're in a passive position. Even our business is affected. Have you thought about the consequences of being tracked by so many hackers?" The screen didn't show the person on the other end of the call. From Fan Jia's expression, it wasn't hard to tell that she was both fearful and respectful of the person. "I didn't think it through, but I already thought of a way to deal with Z. We will start with Qin Mo and let him deal with Z. You won't be able to get close to Z. You won't be able to get close to Qin Mo either." The voice on the other end of the call calmed down. "Fifth Avenue isn't our home ground. Compared to what you have in mind, it's better to kill more Chinese in America so that the troops at the border won't focus on our organization. As for Qin Mo..." He paused. "I received news that someone intends to let him return to the army to carry out the mission to wipe us out. Once Qin Mo and the people he brought out are in the army, we will be in trouble. However, there is something that is beneficial to us. If Qin Mo comes, I can reactivate the hint your brother planted in his mind. Once our plan is complete, we will follow your plan and let Qin Mo deal with Z. Now, you should continue with your actions and create as much chaos as you can. Continue with my plan, create more murders." Fan Jia wasn't stupid. She calmed down and thought about it. That was indeed the right thing to do. There were many people in this world. As long as they were around, the maiden's sacrifice could be completed easily. No matter how capable Z was, he could only stop the incident. He couldn't control human nature. She knew this better than that person. Just watch. Their game of chess would not end so easily. The girl she had chosen should be making her move now. Indeed, that girl still did not know that something had happened to her father. She had always liked to talk about her father's profession on the internet, and she had never thought that it was because of her vanity that she had chosen someone as a chess piece. It was just that no one who was a pawn felt that they were being used. Or rather, they were willing to do some things. For example, right now, the girl had left a comment under the author who was defending his rights. "This is so annoying. As a viewer, all I care about is whether I can continue reading what I've read. Both sides are fans, and I'm simply reading the book. I don't care about copyright infringement, but I feel that the original author is quite pretentious. First, he dug his own grave, and that's not enough. The original author's mother is still holding on to this matter, and in the end, he still dug his own grave. I'll say it again, I'm just stating the facts." What shocked her was that there was still a group of people replying to her. "I think so too. Besides, copyright infringement is a matter of opinion. Even if it's a plagiarism, I still like to read it. Similarly, I'm a fan of both sides and have the same thoughts as the original poster. I sincerely hope that we can coexist peacefully. The fans of the original author have no manners and are too overbearing." Every comment was filled with extremely twisted views, but the accomplices felt that they were all charming little angels. Especially this girl. After leaving her comment online, she left the house. After all, the contact had told her that if the person she hated wanted to be punished, she had to do something herself. If she needed to do something, there were letters and tools in the mailbox. As long as she went to retrieve it and follow the method provided, it would be fine. It was obvious that the girl was very happy. It was really enough of those people who claimed to be righteous on the internet. These people were either too young or a bunch of poor villagers who did not even have the most basic upbringing. She had only said a sentence that couldn't be any more normal, and those people said that her values were not right. The internet was really too violent. However, this did not affect her at all. She had never been able to communicate with stupid people. But until today, why hadn't her father transferred her money? Didn't he know that her expenses abroad were very high? It would be her birthday in 2 days. How she planned her birthday party would directly affect her status in the Chinese community. It had not been easy for her to get to know her current group of friends. If the money was not in place, the people in the circle would definitely think that her family was not rich enough. At the thought of this, the girl became slightly annoyed. She decided to call her family to hurry up and give her money after she took the things in the mailbox. The mailbox in the school was very long. It was like a small cabinet. After opening it, the things inside could be seen. The girl's lips were still curled up until she opened the cabinet door. Suddenly, the sound of a bell rang out. It was as if her action had touched a switch. It was indeed so. Because someone was waiting for him here. They were all detectives. When they saw that the person who came to the mailbox was really a girl, their eyes all widened. After all, the prediction was too accurate. The man who was leading the team was relatively calm. Because he knew very well how capable Qin was. When Qin came to find him, he had a premonition that the case was about to be solved. As expected. But after seeing the girl's innocent appearance, he couldn't help but ask, "Qin, how did you lock onto the target?" When the girl heard this sentence in English, she subconsciously looked in that direction. There was a silhouette standing against the light. The silhouette had one hand in his pocket and was leaning against the mailbox. He exuded an aura that did not belong here. I've used the killer's method to try to contact someone. Whoever comes to the mailbox to get something is obviously an accomplice in the next case. Qin Mo walked out, his figure becoming clearer and clearer. The girl finally saw the outline of his face clearly. She had never encountered such a thing before. He was surrounded by so many police detectives in America. The girl's face was pale, and she kept shouting that she wanted to see the people from the consulate. Qin Mo didn't even want to look at her, even though he knew that there was a high possibility that she would be sent back due to lack of evidence. After all, she wasn't the murderer. However, this kind of person was no different from a direct murderer. Ever since the case appeared, Qin Mo had been wondering if these people were related in some way. After all, the mastermind behind all of this would not just find a random person to help him. Therefore, there must be some kind of connection between them. He didn't think of it. Really think through the most important thing. It was when he was about to leave the castle. He pulled up all the information on a certain person's computer and opened the previous preview record. All the people who were chosen, in a certain case, were either defending the thief, feeling that infringement didn't matter, or saying that they were fans of both sides. They had something in common. These people were accomplices in the beginning, but in the end, they were targeted by the murderer and cleaned up. They had something in common, all of them had made similar comments. And before they died, all of them had looked for this person, saying that they didn't like the person they saw and wanted to teach that person a lesson. The reply they received was that they needed to do something personally. After doing these things, they would be cleaned up by the new people, an endless cycle of evil. And after finding this common point, Qin Mo asked Fatty to filter countless, only locking onto the foreign IP. After locking onto them, he asked Fatty to send each of them a message. The content was sent in a grid, and the words were exactly the same as the content they had received previously. There was always a person behind this case who had never shown his face. It was this person who had never shown his face, using the darkness in everyone's hearts to carry out the murder. And if he wanted to make someone an accomplice, the last step would be to let them use the mailbox to get the tools. After Qin Mo grasped this point, he sent a message and waited for the person to come by the mailbox. The girl still wanted to argue. But it was already useless. The police detectives here weren't to be trifled with. Faced with such a vicious case, they all made the best adjustments. In just one day, using the method Qin Mo said, they caught no less than 6 Chinese girls in various places where they studied and grew up. Once this cycle was broken, it would be difficult to reconnect. But the police detectives in charge of this matter still felt a chill down their backs. If these 6 people weren't arrested by them, it meant that there would be the next victim. But thinking about this carefully, some of these victims were innocent, and some were accomplices themselves, but they were just cleaned up. If it hadn't been for those accomplices, the first victim wouldn't have died. In other words, this was a case of an accomplice harming people. Compared to the direct murder of the murderer, it made people's hearts heavier. It was difficult for them to type out such a report and hand it in. Fortunately, this evil cycle was broken by them. If it hadn't been for Chin, they wouldn't have thought it would be such a case. With this thought, the detective looked towards Chin Mo, walked over, and patted his shoulder with his left hand. With a sigh, he said, "Chin, let's have a drink later, let me thank you properly." You're tuning into the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.